Chapter 727. Just now, when Ji Daoren used the Jiang 6 turns arrow, Zhang Yan was already on his guard. Even under the threat of the heavenly thunder of purple cloud, Zhang Yan still tried to use this skill. Needless to say, Zhang Yan could guess that this attack must contain great power. When dealing with supernatural powers, if a cultivator felt that he could not block it, he could choose an opportunity to escape. When his spiritual vigor was exhausted, he would be able to resolve it. Zhang Yan had the 5 elements escape skill and the sword escape skill, so he could escape far away. However, this had its drawbacks. If there was no one controlling the heavenly thunder of purple cloud, it would give Ji Daoren a chance to escape. However, before he understood the details, he did not want to take it head-on. Just when he was about to fly away with his sword, something in between his brows seemed to have sensed it. It jumped gently and at the same time, a clear sound lingered in his ears. Zhang Yan and that thing had the same mind and spirit. With a slight identification, he knew what was going on. With a quick thought, he simply stopped and stood still. The white light flew over like a meteor. The heaven and earth leaf could not stop it at all. It passed through the white light without any hindrance and headed straight for between Zhang Yan's brows. Just as the arrow was about to hit its target, a smooth and flawless jade scroll leaped out from his high cloud and blocked its path. The two of them collided in a split second and a crisp sound was heard, as if a porcelain bead had cracked. The Jiang arrow seemed to have hit an iron wall as it shattered into hundreds of spiritual lights that danced in the air. Not long after, it dissipated into nothingness. The jade scroll suddenly spun and made a clear sound. It was then carried back into the high cloud by a ball of auspicious light. Zhang Yan broke this technique and once again freed his hands. With a wave of his sleeve, the sky was instantly filled with purple clouds like a tide, and lightning gathered intensely. Lightning gathered and released 1,000 feet of flame. Below, Ji Daoren saw that the 6 turns arrow did not hurt his opponent and was already panicking. Looking at the loud sound in the sky, he could not help but change his expression. Just now, he had relied on the death substitution talisman to avoid the thousands of lightning bolts. Now that he was struck again, there was no way he could survive. He reached into his bag and took out a jade talisman. He first held it tightly in his palm, then gently rubbed it. However, there was a hint of reluctance in his eyes. This was one of the treasures of his sect. It was known as the Qingyang Talisman. It was obtained from the spirit-returning sect's treasury by the founder of the sect. After hundreds of years of refinement, it was just now used for its own use. Later on, the name of the sect. It was also because of this item. This treasure contained the legacy of the predecessors. Secret anecdotes, the various cultivation methods and Tao formulas of the sect, as well as the experiences of past seniors. Another benefit is that if the disciples of our sect hold this treasure in their hands, they can borrow it to avoid a calamity in a life or death situation. However, this treasure had a spirit. Once a Fu Yang disciple used a life-saving technique, he would think that their fate had ended and would choose another master. After Ji Daoren obtained this treasure, he kept it a secret. He wanted to use it to create a grotto heaven. If he used it now, it would be the same as cutting off his path of cultivation. However, if he could not protect his life, what was the use of keeping this treasure? He made up his mind and channeled his mana into the Qingyang talisman. The talisman trembled and a lady in green came out. She was beautiful and had long hair that reached her waist. She was delicate and charming. She looked at him and said softly, "Ji Gaozhang, our fate ends here." Ji Daoren's body trembled. The reluctance in his eyes became stronger. As soon as the lady finished speaking, she turned her slender waist and turned into a ray of light that wrapped around him. In the blink of an eye, she broke through the lightning net and rushed to the Jotian realm. After a dozen miles, Ji Daoren suddenly felt his body lighten. The jade talisman circled around him once and left him. It turned into a ray of light and flew to the northwest. He clenched his fists and looked at the direction where the jade talisman left. He thought to himself, on the day the sect was breached, most of the senior and junior brothers died. There were not many disciples of Fu Yang sect left. Even if there were some who escaped, they were mostly juniors. Even if I take this treasure, how can I rebuild the sect? He immediately made up his mind. As long as he could preserve his life today, he would go to that place to search. If there was a chance, he would kill those juniors. By then, he would be the only disciple of Fu Yang sect left. He might even be able to return the treasure. However, this was only a temporary thought. He knew that he was not out of danger yet. Zhang Yan could catch up at any time. Hence, he made a hand sign and activated the return to source and unification of truth technique. He turned into a ray of light smoke and flew to the south. Zhang Yan saw that Ji Daoren could actually break through the air and escape. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Since this person had colluded with Hui Xian and came to kill him, there was already enmity between them. There was no way to resolve it. If he did not find a way to get rid of him, there would be hidden dangers in the future. Although he was not afraid, the disciples of the sect would be implicated. Hence, he could not allow him to escape. He shrugged and also flew to the Jyotian realm. He was about to risk using the devil trove to chase after him. However, when he looked over, he was slightly surprised. Although the other party had activated the return to source, he had not gone far. He was only slightly faster than his sword escape. He was not as fast as he had thought. Compared to Feng Hai Yang of the Netherworld Spring sect, it was obviously not as fast. After thinking about it again, he could not help but laugh. Previously, he had been prejudiced. The return to source and unification of truth technique also had high and low levels. Due to the different techniques of the sects, many cultivators of the third grade of Yuanying might not use this technique. Zhang Yan squinted his eyes. Other than the sword escape technique, he also had the 5 elements escape technique. If he chased with all his strength, he might be able to take him down. Moreover, the return to source consumed a lot of essence chi. It was very likely that the real body was not far from here. If he chased after him now, he could cut the weeds at the roots and eliminate all future troubles. After he made up his mind, he let out a clear shout and rode on a clear light to chase after them. Ji Daoren was focused on escaping and did not notice that Zhang Yan was chasing after him. However, once the return to source and unification of truth technique was activated, it would not be possible for him to retreat halfway. Even if he noticed it, there was nothing he could do. Zhang Yan chased after him and flew to the south. After half a day, the ray of spiritual light in front of him suddenly stopped. It turned around, broke through the clouds, and flew to the surface of the earth. In a flash, it disappeared into a deserted, grassy valley. He spread his sleeves and parted the high cloud, looking down. This valley was surrounded by mountains on all sides. The cliffs were steep and there were many scattered rocks in the grass. These stones were not placed randomly. Instead, they were arranged in a formation. However, the person who set up the formation was very careful and knew to cover it with grass and trees to avoid attracting attention. If one did not look carefully, it would be difficult to tell. Zhang Yan nodded. It seemed that this was where the body of the person was hiding. He circled around the valley and found many hidden ravines. If he attacked the formation from the front, it was very likely that the person would escape underground. He needed to think of a way to guard against it. After thinking for a while, he stretched out his hand and pointed. A yellow light fell down and drew a circle around the valley. In an instant, the earth was gathered into steel, turning this place into a dangerous place. After doing this, he made sure that there were no mistakes. He then threw the 5 spirits' white carp shuttle into the sky and attacked the formation. Ji Daoren returned to his body. His face was full of exhaustion. Not only did he not get back the dragon pearl in this battle, he even lost his talisman to protect himself. He was also very distressed, especially the Qingyang talisman. It was as if it was cutting a piece of his heart. He took a few deep breaths and pulled his hair out of his bun. Letting his hair fall down, he swore, Ji Gaozhang, swear that I will repay today's humiliation 100-fold in the future. Just as he was swearing, he suddenly heard a rumble from outside. It seemed that someone was attacking the formation door. His heart tightened and he rushed out to take a look. When he saw the figure in the sky, he was instantly shocked and afraid. His body could not help but tremble. He never thought that Zhang Yan would not let him go. Instead, he chased him all the way here. Just now, the words of swearing seemed to have become a joke. At this moment, his vitality was greatly injured. If the formation was broken, it was easy to imagine what would happen. After his expression changed a few times, he felt that he could not wait for death here. He hurriedly took out a few talismans from his sleeves and placed them at the four corners of the formation. This was not to stop the enemy, but to buy him some time. After doing this, he walked into the tunnel that he had prepared in advance. There were a few secret exits that he had left behind before he set up the formation. He could bypass the formation and go straight to the side of the mountain world, where he could escape without anyone noticing. After entering the pit, he kept moving forward. However, when he reached the end, his hands and feet were cold. He did not know how the path to the top of the pit had been changed. The soil around him had become as hard as iron. If he wanted to force his way through, he would definitely cause a great commotion. If it was someone else, it would be fine. However, he knew that the opponent in the sky was skilled in escaping. If he did so, even if he could escape, he would be caught sooner or later. This path was blocked, but he refused to give up. He went to other places to check. However, no matter where he went, it was the same. There was no loophole for him. He could not help but sit down dejectedly. At this moment, there was no road to heaven and no door to hell. He finally understood Hui Xian's feelings at that time. Listening to the sounds of the battle outside, Ji Doran's eyes were bloodshot. He suddenly stood up and said hatefully, "It's just a fight to the death." He took out the ancestral tablet from his sleeves and placed it on the ground. He then took out the Taoist book that he carried with him and placed it at a corner. He respectfully kowtowed 3 times and sighed, "Ancestral Master, please forgive me for my incompetence. I can't rebuild the mountain gate." After saying that, he took out a jade annulus and placed it on his chest. This item could hide his primordial spirit. He was prepared to abandon his physical body if he had no other choice. His Dharmakaya could hide in the jade annulus and see if there was a chance to reincarnate. At this moment, the sounds outside were getting louder. It was obvious that the formation was going to be broken soon. He just stood there blankly and did not go forward to stop it. After an unknown period of time, there was a loud noise that sounded like a landslide. There was also a violent tremor under his feet. He then felt a spiritual vigor coming towards his hiding place at an extremely fast speed. Ji Daoran finally moved. He roared and suddenly knocked away the soil on top of him. He rushed up to the horizon and fled to the west. However, he had not gone more than 10 miles when he heard the sound of a sword behind him. It was as if there was a cold air coming from the side of his neck. In shock, he hurriedly dodged to the side. A cold light swept past. Half of his face and one of his ears were already cut off. He did not dare to turn back. He endured the pain and covered his bloody cheek. He tried to escape with all his might. However, it was all in vain. Suddenly, there were dozens of sword gleams flying over and scattered around his body. They paused for a moment and then gathered in the middle. In a split second, he was cut into dozens of pieces and turned into a rain of blood. Chapter 728. After Zhang Yan killed Ji Daoran, he saw a jade pendant flying into the sky amidst the rain of blood, swaying as it flew into the distance. He took a closer look and roughly recognized that it was the item where the primordial spirit was stored. Even if a cultivator of the 3rd grade of Yuanying, if he was not a disciple of the devil's doctrine and had no physical body, he could only reincarnate as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would also perish in this world. After reincarnating, the cultivator would lose the memory of his previous life. Since the person was already dead, he did not want to pursue the matter. However, at this moment, he suddenly thought of something. After pondering for a while, he reached out and took the jade pendant. After taking it in his hand, he realized that the jade pendant was already full of cracks under the attack of the sword light just now, as if it would shatter with a gentle pinch. No wonder it flew so slowly. Ji Doran's figure emerged from the jade pendant and said with a trembling voice, "Fellow Taoist, are you going to kill them all?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said with a smile, "If you can solve one of my doubts, I can send you to a densely populated place to reincarnate." Ji Daoran was silent for a while before he said, "Are you asking about the 9 yellow star bead?" Zhang Yan nodded slightly. Ji Daoran thought for a while and said softly, "I only heard about the origin of this item from hearsay. It may not be true." After the previous incident, he could see that the 9 yellow star bead had many secrets, and what he knew was probably only bits and pieces. If he told the truth, in the future, if Zhang Yan found out that he was wrong and thought that he was lying, he could casually send a disciple to put him in eternal damnation. Zhang Yan said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, you only need to tell I what you heard. Even if there is a mistake, I won't blame you." After getting this promise, Ji Daoran was relieved and told him everything he knew about the 9 yellow star bead. When Zhang Yan heard that the 9 yellow star bead could devour the essence blood of cultivators and that Lin Chang had died to it, he was a little surprised and thought to himself, "It's a treasure, but it's extremely strange. I'm afraid it's not the right way." He raised his hand and was about to put the jade pendant away when Taoist Ji hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Perfected One, the item that Yu Bingyi used in the battle earlier was one of the 3 edicts passed down by Grand Master Daimu in the past. It's called the Imperial Decree Diagram, and has an inconceivable effect. Why don't you take it back, Perfected One? According to what I know, this item needs to be placed in a box polished from a spirit turtle's shell or a serpent's bone. Only then can it be preserved." Yen, Zhang and Yen, Zhang Yen, Zhang Yen, Zhang Tian, Zhang, Zhang, I, U, I. U, N U, U, I U, U, I, Dao, as to be. Ji Daoran hurriedly bowed a few times in the jade pendant and said, "I don't dare, I don't dare." Zhang Yen smiled faintly and put the jade pendant into his sleeve. He looked at the sky. It was dawn when he came out, and it was almost noon now. It would take at least half a day to get back. By then, the Imperial Decree Diagram might have fallen into someone else's hands. He thought for a while and took out a pen and paper. He wrote a letter and put it into the cover. Then, he sent it out with a snap of his fingers. The letter was sent to Wang Kaiwei, ordering her to go to the Qian position dragon pillar and retrieve the item. After identifying the direction, he tidied up his sleeves and stepped on the high cloud. He went above Jiutian and flew back the way he came. After traveling for an hour, he heard the sound of surging waves. He looked down and saw a river flowing from north to south. It turned out that he had unknowingly arrived at the Shangchuan River of the 5-Dragon River. This place was originally the demarcation line between Zhongtai and Xianyu. There were celestial cities on both sides of the river. Now that the two sects had merged into one, they were naturally under the control of Zhongtai. At this moment, he heard a short neigh. He looked over and saw hundreds of demon turtles moving slowly in the river. Each of them was huge, and the one in the lead was like a mountain. When it moved in the river, it cut through the waves, and the rushing torrents couldn't move it at all. He looked for a while and thought, could this be the rumored man-eating demon turtle that runs rampant on the river? After thinking for a while, he descended from Jiutian and took out the jade annulus. He pointed to the front and said, "Fellow Taoist Ji, can this demon turtle's shell be used to store the Qiyuan constitution painting?" Ji Daoran was solidifying his body in the jade annulus. He was trying to repair the jade annulus so that his hiding place would be more secure. When he was suddenly called out, he couldn't help but feel anxious. When he heard Meng Qi's question, he was relieved and answered, "This demon turtle is the best. Although it's not easy to provoke it, it's not a match for a real person. However, when it's in danger, it will hide under the water and never come out again. That's why it's hard to catch and kill it." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Don't worry, I have my ways to deal with it." The demon turtles had been here for thousands of years. Ji Daoren was curious about how he would deal with them. He cupped his hands and said, "Can I have a look?" Zhang Yan nodded slightly and loosened his hand. The jade annulus floated a few feet away. He spread his 5 fingers and grabbed one of the demon turtles. An enormous spiritual vigor surged in an instant. The demon turtle did not have any treasures to hide, so how could it resist his 5 elements escape technique? With a turn of his supernatural power, it was moved from the river to the shore. Ji Daoren was shocked. He heard that Zhang Yan had moved mountains during the dragon pillar spell. At that time, he was still doubtful. Now that he saw him move a demon turtle to the shore so easily, he couldn't help but sigh. It seems like I didn't lose in the hands of this person. The demon turtles were difficult to deal with in the river. However, once they were out of the water, even a Yuaniing cultivator could easily subdue them. At that moment, its belly was facing the sky, so it couldn't turn over for a while. Hence, it was howling in pain. The demon turtle with the largest body heard the sound and turned its head. Soon, it realized that Zhang Yan was the culprit. It opened its mouth and a stinky smoke rushed towards him. Zhang Yan stood with his hands clasped behind his back, not moving an inch. A gust of astral wind swirled around his body and blew away the smoke. He said indifferently, "I know you can understand human language. Today, I need to borrow the shell of the turtle. If you have it, take it and I will let your clansmen go." The demon turtle was intelligent. It stared fiercely at Zhang Yan for a while and said, "I hope you keep your promise." It slowly sank its huge body into the water. After 4 hours, a white shell about 10 feet in size emerged from the water and threw it to the shore. It looked straight at Zhang Yan and said, "I brought it, release it." When Ji Daoren saw the shell, he couldn't help but show a strange expression. Zhang Yan raised his hand and took the white shell into his hand. It was like a beautiful piece of jade, sparkling and translucent, with deep patterns on its back that were similar to the erosion runes. It seemed to contain some mysterious and wonderful principles. Although it looked different from the other turtles, its aura was from the same source. It wasn't something to fool him. He nodded and circulated his supernatural power. A big hand reached out from the strong cloud and grabbed the demon turtle, throwing it back into the river. The big turtle leader seemed to know that the person in front of it wasn't easy to deal with. After the demon turtle returned to the water, it hid in the water with its people and didn't show up again. Ji Daoren's jade wall of hiding came over and circled the white shell in Zhang Yan's hand, clicking its tongue. Zhang Yan looked up and asked, "Fellow Taoist, could it be that you know the origin of this item?" Ji Daoren cupped his hands and said, "I don't know. It's said that there is a jade turtle among the demon turtles. It's the ancestor of all turtles. No one knows how big it is. It lies in the middle of the river and suppresses the 5 dragons' earth spirit. When it moves, the mountain will shake and the earth will shake. The river will flood the land. This old turtle molts its shell once every 1,000 years. It can prolong its life by 100 years, but no one has ever seen it. This thing looks like white jade. Maybe it was left on it." Zhang Yan said, "Since no one has seen it, how can we know it was left by the jade turtle? The saying that it can prolong one's life is just a rumor." Ji Daoren hurriedly said, Yes, you're right, immortal." Zhang Yan smiled and took the jade wall of hiding back into his sleeve along with the turtle shell. He was about to go back to the divine house. At this moment, a letter flew over from afar. In a flash, it arrived beside him. He grabbed it, removed the cover, and opened the letter. His brows furrowed slightly, and his expression revealed a bit of seriousness. He had no choice but to pay attention to the contents of the letter. After pondering for a long time, he made up his mind and flew towards the Li Nan Dragon Pillar. Qin Country, Nanwu Mountain, Quantamin. Monastery headmaster Go Su Min sat in the main hall and looked at the 3 young disciples standing under the stairs. She said, "This time, you 3 must remember to be careful with your words and actions. Don't cause trouble. Even if you feel wronged, you must endure it. Don't let down your teacher's expectations. The leading disciple bowed and said, "We will remember the monastery headmaster's decree." Go Su-min was very satisfied. After saying a few words to Jiayan, she said, "Then you can go back and prepare." The three disciples knelt down and kowtowed before leaving the main hall. Go Su-min sighed and said, "This Wusong is steady and has good aptitude. It's very rare. The other two are also not bad." To be able to find these three people in such a short time, it must have been hard on junior brother. Senchu didn't dare to take credit. He slightly bowed and said, "Other than those core formation disciples, only these three people have good aptitude and can be passed on to the sect." Go Su-min was very pleased and said, "What did Jinren say?" Senchu hurriedly said, "It's already agreed. Jinren will leave for the north tomorrow." Go Su-min said in a low voice, "He's a little impatient." Senchu smiled and said, "Jinren isn't a disciple of my school. He came here to collect the poisonous miasma. Now that the miasma has disappeared, Jinren naturally has no intention of staying here." Go Su-min sighed and said, "It's better for him to leave earlier." Although the great emissary didn't say it clearly, I felt that he looked at Jinren with an unfriendly gaze. Senchu was shocked and stood up, saying, "Could it be that the great emissary wants to harm Jinren?" Go Su-min smiled bitterly and said, "The great sect will not allow any information about the ban to be leaked. Jinren has stayed in my school for such a long time. It's fine if he doesn't leave. If he does, the great emissary will definitely stop him." Senchu panicked and said, "Then what should we do? If the great emissary gives the order to deal with Jinren?" He shook his head repeatedly, No, Jinren is our benefactor. We must not harm him." Go Su-min usually has a soft personality, but at this moment, he is very calm and said, "Junior apprentice brother, tomorrow I will host a banquet to entertain the great emissary and delay him. At that time, Jinren will have a chance to escape. As long as he leaves Quantum Inn, Shang Qingjun still has the responsibility of guarding this place. When that time comes, where can we find him? You and I just need to put on a good show." Chapter 729. The next day, Go Su-min set up a banquet in front of the star-tossing spring on the mountain peak to entertain the envoys of Fengxiang Sword School. Shang Qingjun had always been fond of extravagant pleasures, so he did not refuse and happily brought a few disciples to attend the banquet. After the greetings, he did not ask for the reason and sat down to drink. Go Su-min saw that there was nothing strange on his face, and his originally uneasy heart was slightly relieved. As long as he could delay this person here for half an hour, it would be enough for Zhang Boyan to bring the three disciples far away. He and Senchu, who was sitting below, looked at each other and took turns to toast. However, the banquet did not even last for half an hour before a disciple came to report, "Chancellor, Senior Master Zheng is here." Go Su-min was startled and cast a questioning look at Senchu, but the latter shook his head. Shang Qingjun casually threw his wine cup and said loudly, "It was I who called Zhenguozhi here. Is there something wrong?" Go Su-min hurriedly stood up and smiled apologetically, "Nothing, Senior Master Zheng usually refines medicine in the Golden Pool and rarely gets close to his fellow disciples. I couldn't invite him even if I wanted to, it's High Envoy's face that is greater." Although he said so, he secretly frowned and muttered in his heart, "Senior Master Zheng always guards the Golden Pool elixir furnace and never leaves the house." Even when Shang Qingjun came that day, he did not show up. When did these two get together? High Envoy Shang, what do I say about Daoren? These two junior brothers of mine don't really think highly of me as their senior brother. As the voice sounded, a white-haired Daoren with a cane and a bell hung on it walked in, and at his feet was a single-horned demon frog jumping forward. Go Su-min got up and got down from the table. She took the initiative to step forward and said, "What are you talking about, senior apprentice brother? Shin junior apprentice brother and I are happy that you are willing to come. Please take a seat." Tsing Daoren snorted and went straight to Go Su-min's original seat. He raised his cup and said, "High Envoy Shang, Daoren is only here because of you. Let me give you a toast first." Shang Qingjun raised his wine cup and made a toast, then tilted his head back and downed the wine in one gulp. At this time, he looked left and right, seemingly unintentionally asking, Dean Wu, since you're hosting a banquet here, why isn't Jinren here? Go Sumin's expression changed slightly, but she squeezed out a smile and said, Zhang doesn't like crowds, and he's not a cultivator of our sect, so I didn't invite him. Shang Qingjun played with the wine cup in his hand and shook his head, saying, how can this be? I heard that this Jinren saved the lives of many disciples in Quantum Inn, so how can I neglect him? This is not the way to treat a guest. Zhenguozhi put down his wine cup and said, that's right. Speaking of which, I'm the host. I haven't seen this Zhang before, why don't I invite him over, Daoren? Go Sumin's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to calm down and said, Jinren has a strange temper, I'll have to invite him over personally. Zhenguozhi sighed and made a gesture to stop her, saying, as the dean, junior apprentice brother still has to drink with High Envoy, how can you leave the banquet? Just now, High Envoy has said that Jinren has done a favor for Quantum Inn, so as the pavilion master, I have to thank him in person. Senchu saw that things weren't going well and said anxiously, why don't I do it for you? Shang Qingjun said impatiently, what trouble can it be to invite someone over? Zhenguozhi, you go and invite him. If that priest Zhang is unwilling to come, just say that it's me who invited him, and he won't dare to not give face. Seeing that he was dead set in his words, Go Sumin and Senchu couldn't say anything and could only watch as Zhenguozhi walked out. They could only secretly hope that Zhang Boyan would move faster and leave the mountain gates before he was found. Shang Qingjun saw that the two of them were uneasy and sneered, Dean Wu, there's wine but no entertainment, it's a little boring. Go Sumin seemed to come back to her senses and said, yes, yes. She hurriedly ordered a disciple to call the singers and dancers over to liven things up. Senchu thought for a while and hesitantly stood up, saying, Senior apprentice brother, the abode where Jinren is staying is a little remote. Senior apprentice brother Zheng hasn't been in the sect for a long time, so I'm afraid that he doesn't know the way. Why don't I go take a look? Before Go Sumin could say anything, Shang Qingjun interrupted, Senchu, I heard that you have a beloved son. He's still young, but he's already cultivated to essence condensation and will manifestation. I'm interested in taking him as my disciple, what do you think? With this interruption, Senchu couldn't leave for the time being. However, he didn't feel happy that the other party wanted to take his son as a disciple. Instead, he felt a chill run up his spine. He stood there blankly for a while before saying fearfully, thank you for your favor, Great Envoy. It's more than I could ask for if Great Envoy is willing to take my son as a disciple. It's just that my son was poisoned by miasma some time ago, and his vitality must have been damaged. Until now, he's been in a daze and isn't as intelligent as before. Shang Qingjun was a little surprised and said, there's such a thing. He waved his hand and said, that's not a problem. I'm familiar with the Ku Xin sex elders. It's not difficult to ask for a few root cultivation and foundation strengthening pills. In my opinion, there's no need to change the date of the apprenticeship ceremony. Since everyone is here now, just summon your son here and pay his respects. Senchu was groaning in his heart. He didn't expect Shang Qingjun to do this. If he brought his beloved son to the hall, he would undoubtedly be sending a sheep into the tiger's mouth. In the future, he would be under this person's control. Seeing that he didn't move after a long time, Shang Qingjun pulled a long face and said coldly, why? Does Pavilion Master Shen think that I'm not worthy? Go Sumin hurriedly said, Great Envoy, Junior Martial Brother doesn't mean that. He then signaled to Senchu with his eyes and said, Junior Martial Brother, we'll do as Great Envoy says. Go and find your nephew. Shang Qingjun waved his sleeves and said, there's no need for that. I've already ordered someone to find him. He clapped his hands and a beautiful servant girl walked into the hall with a 7 to 8 years old boy. The boy's eyes were lively and he didn't look like he was stupid at all. When he saw Senchu, he called out, Daddy, and broke free from the servant girl's hand and ran over. Senchu took a glance at the servant girl, but the latter avoided his gaze unnaturally. He snorted heavily and reached out to hug the child who was pouncing towards him. He sighed in his heart as he knew that the other party had already planned this. He turned around and pointed at Shang Qingjun and said bitterly, this is your master. Why aren't you going to greet him? The boy responded with an, oh, and went forward obediently. He kowtowed and served tea as a form of greeting. Shang Qingjun initially only wanted to have a hostage in his hands so that he could control Quantum In. At least before the seal was lifted, he couldn't let anything go wrong. However, when he saw that the boy was extraordinarily intelligent and his aptitude was much better than his disciples, he really wanted to take him as his disciple. He pondered for a while and threw a jade pendant to the boy, saying, "Take it. This is a gift from your master." The boy thought for a while and took down the golden necklace on his neck. He handed it over and said, "Master, this is a gift from your disciple." Shang Qingjun was startled. He then laughed and received it, saying, "Good disciple. Your master will accept it." At the same time, Zhang Boyan followed his plan and flew out of the mountain with Wu Song and the other two disciples in a yellow cloud. As soon as they left the mountain gate, a ray of light chased after them. Someone shouted, "Jinren, where are you going?" Zhang Boyan already knew that this trip wouldn't be too smooth. He looked back and saw a Daoran wearing a gray feather crane cloak. On his shoulder was a demon frog. Although he had never seen Zhenguizhi before, he had heard about him when he was chatting with Sun Chu. He sneered, "Priest Zheng doesn't need to ask about this." He paused for a while and said, "If I were you, I'd rather go back to my residence to recuperate. Looking at your expression now, you can live for another 3 to 4 years." Zhenguizhi was shocked. 100 years ago, when he went to the South Cliff continent to collect herbs, he was accidentally bitten by a poisonous creature in the mountains. At that time, he knew that he wouldn't live for long. Later, he used medicinal pills to conceal his qi dynamic. Even Shang Qingjun couldn't see through him. He didn't expect that he would be exposed in front of Zhang Boyan. He laughed at himself and admitted, "Jinren Zhang has good eyesight." He turned to look at the 3 disciples on the cloud. He took out an item and threw it to one of the younger disciples. He said, "Hua Zhong, although you're not my disciple, you're talented in the art of alchemy. This is the recipe that I've studied for my whole life. I'll pass it on to you now. When you go to another sect, don't ruin my reputation as a Quantum In." The disciple took it and bowed to Zhenguizhi on the cloud. Zhang Boyan narrowed his eyes and said, "Fellow Taoist Zheng, you already knew that I was going to leave." Zhenguizhi snorted coldly. "Those 2 stupid junior brothers of mine thought that their arrangements were flawless. In reality, their every move was being watched. If I didn't feign civility and temporarily calm Shang Qingjun down, he would have made his move long ago." At this point, he waved his sleeve and said, Zhang, leave quickly. If I don't return after a long time, Shang Qingjun will definitely be suspicious. If he comes chasing after me, I'll stop him here." Zhang Boyan chuckled. He didn't hold back and cupped his hands at him. Then, he activated his escape art. A yellow cloud wrapped around the 3 disciples and headed north. Seeing that he had left, Zhenguizhi pointed downwards. The horned frog let out a croak and suddenly leaped up, disappearing into the ground. After doing this, he sat down on the spot and closed his eyes to rest. About a moment later, he suddenly heard the whistle of a sword. When he opened his eyes to look, he saw a ray of sword light suddenly flying from the peak of the mountain. It was like a rainbow sweeping across the land, flying towards him. Soon, the sword light arrived in front of him. Shang Qingjun appeared and said angrily, "Zhenguizhi, where is he? Where is he?" Zhenguizhi said slowly, "He's gone." As he spoke, he secretly formed a hand seal, and with a rumbling sound, the horned frog suddenly sprang up from the ground. At this moment, it had already expanded to several zhang in size, and with a single gulp, it swallowed Shang Qingjun, who was caught off guard. He circulated his technique repeatedly, and the single-horned frog's body rapidly shrank, quickly shrinking to a size of 3 meters. But at this point, no matter how hard he tried, he was unable to shrink it in the slightest. Not long after, his forehead was covered in sweat. Suddenly, there was a sound of wind beside him. He looked over in surprise, and when he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be shocked. He said, Zhang, why are you back? Zhang Boyan's eyes were filled with green flames, and he said with a deep smile, if I leave just like this, Shang Qingjun will definitely take it out on you, Quantum In. So after thinking about it, I decided to work with your sect to get rid of this person. Zheng Guixi's body trembled, and his face was filled with shock and anger. Fengxiang Sword School was going to be sealed, and Quantum In was afraid that they would burn the bridge after crossing it. So, he decided to send his disciples to the North Continent. That was a backup plan, just in case. But he was actually still holding on to a sliver of hope, and he didn't want to completely become enemies with the upper sect. He stopped Shang Qingjun here. At most, he would take all the blame on himself. Anyway, he wouldn't be able to live for long. But if he were to kill the High Envoy here with an outsider, then there would really be no way out. Before he could react, he heard the demon frogs cry. Among the blood and flesh that filled the sky, hundreds of sword lights rushed out and went straight for where the two of them were. Chapter 730. Zhang Boyan shook his body, and thousands of demon heads surged out from the high cloud above him, charging towards the tip of the sword. At the same time, he said, Fellow Daoist Zheng, why are you still standing there? Hurry up and attack with me. If we don't finish this person off, do you think he will let you go? Zheng Guixi saw many sword gleams coming towards him, and how could he not know that Shang Qingjun had misunderstood him? If it was someone else from Fengxiang Sword School, he would have the heart to explain. However, this person had always been stubborn and proud. Even if he knew that he was in the wrong, he would not repent. Now that he had attacked, he had completely given up on the idea, and used the golden bell in his hand to protect himself. However, he only managed to block for a short while before he could not hold on any longer. Shang Qingjun was enraged. He'd always been arrogant, and he'd thought that he'd subdued those who'd tried to win him over earlier. But now that he saw it, it was obvious that he'd been played for a fool. Naturally, he was filled with hatred, and more than half of the hundreds of sword lights were aimed at him. At the same time, he glanced to the side, and saw that the demon heads were torn apart when they collided with the sword gleams. He could not help but laugh mockingly, but soon after, his expression changed. The broken bodies of the demon heads merged back together, and they actually left the sword gleams and went straight for him. He calculated in his mind, and decided to give up on the idea of killing Zheng Guixi immediately. He summoned dozens of sword shadows back to protect him, and the dozens of sword gleams that were aimed at Zhang Boyan did not change. Zhang Boyan sneered, and did not dodge. A dove-faced iron plate flew out from the high cloud, and grew to the size of 10 feet with the wind. It hung above his head, and when the sword gleams attacked, there was a dense sound of collision, but they could not penetrate it. After the thousands of demon heads went up, they circled around Shang Qingjun. From time to time, they would rush down and bite, but every time they were cut by the sword gleams, they would reform. He could not find a way to break through them, and could only use the sword qi to block them. On the other hand, the pressure on Zheng Guixi was greatly reduced. Whenever he could free his hand, he would brandish the bamboo stick in his hand and strike it repeatedly. Shang Qingjun was confident that he was ranked third among the 6 profound swords in Fengxiang Sword School. He thought that he would be able to kill the two of them in a few moves, but he did not expect the situation to be reversed. Instead, he was the one who was forced into a sorry state. He roared angrily, and his body and sword became one. A ray of light shot out, smashing through the thousands of demons and killing his way out of the encirclement. Reaching the sky, Zhang Xian waved his hand. He gathered all the sword shadows and combined them into a black sword that was about 4 feet long. Then, he pointed it downwards, and the sword light went straight for Zhang Boyan. The latter was protected by the dove face plate. He stood still and casually cast a few spells on the tablet. In a split second, black clouds appeared and piled up in front of him, blocking him from the wind and rain. The sword light entered the clouds, but it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There were no ripples. But at the same time, he suddenly heard the sound of metal shattering, and then he let out a muffled groan as he fell to the ground. A large hole had opened up on his back, and blood was flowing out. A damaged golden bell had fallen to the side of his body. Shang Qingjun laughed maniacally and said, "This is the result of going against me." The 100-shadow sword had the ability to confuse the enemy's eyes and ears, and it could change back and forth between the real and the fake. Therefore, when the sword was released, it was often impossible to guard against. Just now, the sword that was pointed at Zhang Boyan was actually just a sword shadow, while the one that was aimed at Zhenguji was the real sword. As expected, it was hit in one hit. Zhang Boyan only glanced at it indifferently, and did not look at it anymore. Zhenguji was incompetent, but he could not be blamed. At this time, 2 rays of light flew down from the mountain peak. It was Go Su-min and Sun Chu. When they saw that Zhenguji was killed, they were stunned and did not know what to do. Zhang Boyan had been fighting for a long time, but he did not make a move because he was waiting for these two to come out. He shouted loudly, "The two of you, what are you waiting for? Let's kill this person together. If he escapes, how can you, Quantumin, live?" When Shang Qingjun heard this, he snorted coldly and immediately rode his sword to kill, but he was the first to make a move. Wu and Sun Chu were still hesitating, but after being forced by him, they were not willing to wait for death. They each took out their magical weapons to deal with him. When Zhang Boyan saw the two of them fighting, he felt that it was about time. With a burst of mana, he breathed out 2 gusts of cold air from his nostrils. In a split second, the cold air formed into a sharp sword that radiated cold light. This was the cold crystal white bone sword that he had worshipped for hundreds of years. He reached out and took out a paper talisman from his sleeve. On this talisman, there was a little person struggling and twisting. At first glance, it was actually 90% similar to Shang Qingjun. He chuckled and clenched his fist. The little person immediately let out a miserable cry. Shang Qingjun's expression changed abruptly. He seemed to feel the pain as he held his chest. His face showed that he was in pain. He took a few breaths and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He also felt that something was wrong and shouted, "Who is it that wants to harm me?" Zhang Boyan smiled sinisterly. This technique was called Sand Shooting Shadow. It was a sinister supernatural power of the Dark Spring sect. Usually, it gathered the chi of the cultivators and stored it in a talisman. When it was cast during a battle, it could kill the enemy in an instant. Although this technique was powerful, it was also harsh. The cultivator had to gather the chi of the cultivator within 100 days. If it was interrupted for a day, the cultivator would have to start all over again. When casting the technique, it had to be within 3 miles. Therefore, there were very few people in the Dark Spring sect who practiced this supernatural power. After joining Zhang Yan, Zhang Boyan felt that he had very few tricks up his sleeves. The powerful supernatural powers of the sect such as 9 Nether Great Sorrow Wind, and Soul Dispersing 3 Dispelling Chi, were not taught to him. Therefore, he practiced this technique. Ever since he entered the viewing pond courtyard, he'd collected everyone's chi activity. Shang Qingjun had been living here for several months, but he'd also secretly done something to him, and Shang Qingjun was completely unaware of it. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he threw the talisman into the air. Then, he held the tip of the sword and slashed at the talisman. With a poo sound, blood actually spurted out of the talisman. Shang Qingjun screamed and fell from the sky. His limbs twitched for a moment, and then he stopped moving. After a moment, a spiritual light suddenly flew out from his chest and went straight to the sky. Go Su-min's expression changed. Not good. It's the suicide talisman. Quickly stop it. The suicide talisman was carried by the elders of Fengxiang Sword School. If they were killed by an enemy, it would fly to inform the sect. Zhang Boyan's eyes flashed with green light. He immediately shot out a flying nail and nailed the talisman in the air. Seeing that the talisman was stopped, Wu Wenshan finally relaxed. However, they felt cold sweat on their backs. While the three of them were paying attention to the flying letter, they did not realize that a long shadow had silently emerged from the ground. It slowly crawled towards Shang Qingjun, who was lying on the ground, and then burrowed into his nostril aperture. After a few breaths, countless balls of colorful mist had enveloped his entire body. Zhang Boyan first noticed something was wrong. He raised his hand and dozens of green flames fell down. However, the colorful fog didn't seem to be afraid. In the blink of an eye, the fog disappeared. However, Shang Qingjuan's corpse was nowhere to be seen. Only a small eye appeared out of nowhere. Wu and Shen looked at each other in bewilderment. Zhang Boyan looked in that direction and frowned. He said solemnly, "This place is strange. We can't stay here for long. The two of you need to find a way out as soon as possible." At this time, thousands of zhang below the surface, there was an underground cave. Shang Qingjun was expressionless as he sat cross-legged on the ground. He glanced at the 100-shadow sword beside him and said, "The art of Yuanling sword. Don't tell me you still want to seek life in death." When the 100-shadow sword heard this, it wanted to jump up and fly away. However, he pinched it lightly and caught it. Although the sword kept jumping, it couldn't break free. With a strange smile, Shang Qingjun slit his wrist and placed it in front of the sword, allowing the blood to drip onto it. Then he spat out 3 mouthfuls of foul air onto the sword. The sword turned from black to white, and from white to black. After 9 consecutive times, it finally stopped moving. He picked up the sword and said faintly, "I've been trapped here for 10,000 years. My original body still can't come out. Today, I'll borrow your body. When I gather the natal pearl in the future, I'll let you go." Dongxing North Continent, Linan Dragon Pillar. After Mao Wuwei took the 9 yellow pearl, he bade farewell to Qiao Huanzhuan and returned to the mountain gate of South Continent with his 3 junior brothers and a group of disciples. However, before he could cross the 5 Dragons River, he saw a long rainbow appear in the sky, heading straight for him. He was startled and reached out to stop the crowd. Then, he stepped out and shouted, "Jinren Zhang, why are you here?" As soon as the sword light fell, Zhang Yan waved away the light cloud and appeared. He raised his hand to return the greeting and said, "Sect leader Mao, I came specially to look for you." Mao Wuwei laughed and spread out his tattered sleeves. He said, "Daoren, I don't have anything valuable with me. I rely on begging everywhere to survive. I wonder what item is worth Jinren Zhang's attention." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I came for the pearl under the dragon pillar." After receiving the letter from Zhang Boyan, he secretly guessed that the 9 yellow star pearl had a great connection with the seal under Quantum Inn. Therefore, he didn't want the pearl to go there again. He decided to try his best to gather all the items in his hands. As soon as these words came out, the 3 Jinren behind Mao Wuwei, Jinren Chunbai, Shancheng, and Pius all looked nervous. They had heard of Zhang Yan's reputation. Even Rong Juanzhong, who was most likely to achieve the cave heaven, was killed by him. If he wanted to take it by force, they might not be his opponent. Mao Wuwei remained calm and said, "An honest man doesn't do underhanded things. Daoren got a pearl under the dragon pillar, but it seems to have nothing to do with Jinren Zhang, right?" Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I am willing to exchange 2 magical weapons for this pearl. What do you think, sect leader Mao?" Mao Wuwei didn't reject him immediately. Instead, he stroked his beard and muttered to himself. After a while, he said, "This old Taoist wants to ask something that I shouldn't ask. This pearl. Does Master Zhang know its origin?" Zhang Yan replied, "It's also hearsay. I don't know if it's true or not." He did not hide anything and told him about what he heard from Ji Daoren. After listening, Mao Wuwei secretly weighed the pros and cons. He then stretched out 3 fingers and squinted his eyes. "I have 3 junior brothers, but 2 magical weapons are not enough to go around. It's unfair to one and discriminate against the other. I want 3. Zhang Yan smiled and immediately agreed, all right, it's settled then. But the 3 magical weapons are not with me. Please wait for a moment, sect leader Mao, I will send someone to send them over. The 3 magical weapons that he placed in the immortal city had not been exchanged yet. The elixir to refine the white moon fruit came from another place. It was useless to keep it there, so it was a good time to exchange it. Mao Wuwei waved his hand and said, there's no need for that. I trust Jinren Zhang. You take the pearl first. When you're free in the future, just remember to send me what you promised me. He reached into his bosom and took out a copper goblet. With a gentle push, it floated to the front of Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He reached out to take it and put it into his sleeve. He nodded and said, thank you, sect leader Mao, for your help. In 10 days or a month, I will definitely send the 3 magical weapons to your sect. Chapter 731. P.S. There's one more update, it's a little later, you can read it tomorrow. After Zhang Yan finished his words, he bowed to the people of Qing Xian's sect and used his escape technique. He turned into a beam of rainbow light and headed east. Pure White Immortal moved to Mao Wuwei's side and said, are you really willing to give him the pearl just like that? Mao Wuwei curled his lips and said, that treasure can only be used by blood sacrifice. Are you willing to give it up or am I? This kind of evil treasure, how can it be better than 3 magical weapons? On the other side, Reverend Pious Passion was puzzled and said, Senior brother, do you really believe this person's words? Maybe this pearl has other uses and he was just trying to deceive us. Mao Wuwei looked at the direction where Zhang Yan left and sneered, whether it's true or not, it's already been given out. Why bother thinking about it? Our Qing Xian sect doesn't need to get involved in this mess. Let He Yizhu and Qin Yuan worry about it. Zhang Yan's original intention was to go east to look for Fengxiang Sword School. After an hour, he bumped into the people of Kuxin's sect who were returning to the south. He needed to pay his respects to this sect, so he changed his escape light and stopped in front of the flying boat. He bowed and said, He Zhangmen pays his respects. He Yizhu didn't invite him up, but 2 auspicious clouds dropped down from the cloud plate and carried him out with a few elders. He Yizhu's eyes were filled with caution as he said, so it's Jinren Zhang, aren't you here to get the treasure from the Qian position dragon pillar, why are you here to look for me? Zhang Yan said seriously, the purpose of my trip is related to the treasure of the dragon pillar. He Yizhu was shocked. He took a step back and looked around. He felt scared again and took half a step forward. He raised his voice and said, the 5 sects have already agreed on how to divide the pillar. Jinren Zhang is also here. Is he going back on his words now? Zhang Yan smiled and said, He Zhangmen misunderstood. I didn't mean that. Since the treasure is in your sect's hands, I won't ask for it for free. I'm willing to exchange my elixir formula. Pill recipe? He Yizhu smiled disdainfully and said, everyone in the world knows about my bitter heart sect's alchemy ability. What's the use of a few pill recipes, Daoist Zhang? Zhang Yan smiled and didn't say much. He handed over the 2 pill recipes and said, it won't be too late to discuss after He Zhangmen reads them. He Yizhu took it. At first, he had a look of disdain on his face, but as he continued to look at it, his gaze froze and his hands tightened. However, after looking through it, he noticed that a few spirit herbs were missing from the crucial areas. He flipped through it repeatedly but was unable to find them. Knowing that the other party had intentionally hidden them, he couldn't help but hesitate. The elder behind him saw that his expression was strange. Senior brother, you, He Yizhu closed her eyes and pushed the pill recipe into his arms. She sighed and said, go and look at it yourself. The elder took it curiously. He was an expert in this field. With just a cursory look, he knew that this pill recipe was no small matter. Not only did it describe how to refine a precious pill, but it also contained an extremely brilliant alchemy technique. Even if the intricacies weren't fully explained, one could still see the whole picture. If he could get his hands on it, he would definitely be able to improve his alchemy skills to the next level. If it was passed down, the entire sect would benefit immensely. He said excitedly, "Sect leader." He knew that he was tempted, but he was also in a difficult position. Based on the current situation, the pill formula was undoubtedly more important. However, the pearl had been obtained from beneath the dragon pillar. He didn't dare to confirm whether or not it had been passed down by Patriarch Damu, but he could sense that it contained an enormous secret that he couldn't give up so easily. After thinking for a while, he grabbed the pill recipe from the elder's hands and tossed it to Zhang Yan. He said, "Jinren Zhang, my sect doesn't need this item. Please take it back." Zhang Yan seemed to have expected this outcome. With a wave of his sleeve, the pill recipe was immediately turned into powder. The elder's face was filled with pain. He then tossed a porcelain bottle over and said, "What if it's this item?" He didn't dare to take it. She only sent a stream of spiritual energy to hold it, blocking it from 30 feet away. She asked carefully, "What is this item?" Zhang Yan said, "This item is called Penglai Qi. If a cultivator breathes in it when breaking through to the next realm, their chances of success will increase greatly." Zhangman's eyes lit up. This was obviously another good treasure. His Ku Xian sect was different from other sections. Half of his cultivation depended on his own training and the other half on the consumption of pills. Although he advanced faster than his peers, when he reached the threshold, he needed a lot of pills, and the higher he advanced, the harder it was. Now his cultivation had reached the second Yuanying realm, but to go to the third realm, he needed to consume hundreds of pills. However, the pills needed to refine this pill were extremely rare. If he wanted to find all of them, he would have to wait for hundreds of years. If this Penglai Qi really had such an effect, its value was even higher than the pill recipe just now. He looked like he was struggling. After a long time, he finally made a decision. He opened his mouth and said bitterly, "Jinren Zhang, I still can't agree." He looked at the porcelain bottle with great reluctance and pushed it back. Zhang Yan was rejected twice, but he wasn't angry. He kept the porcelain bottle and said, "If that's the case, I won't force you. I only hope that Zhangmen will protect this treasure and not lose it." Zhu's face darkened. She said, "Jinren Zhang, what do you mean?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "I don't mean anything else. I just want to inform Zhangmen that this precious pearl is an evil item. I think your sect has already noticed it when you took it. If there's a disaster in the future, don't be careful. I will take my leave now." Zhu only took this as a threat. She laughed coldly and cupped her hands, saying, "Jinren Zhang, you don't have to worry about me. I won't see you out." Zhang Yan leaped up and in the blink of an eye, he broke through the high cloud in front of everyone and went beyond the sky. The elder then said, "Sect leader, this precious pearl is very strange. What's the use of it? But with that pill recipe, our Ku Xian sect." Zhu snorted and interrupted him, saying, "Senior brother, think about it carefully. If that precious pearl is really inferior to those two items, why would he be willing to exchange it?" The elder was stunned. He then slapped his forehead and said, "Sect leader, you're really farsighted. I'm muddle-headed. I almost missed the important matters for the momentary benefit in front of me." After Zhang Yan left, he continued to head east on his sword. However, he did not see any disciples of Fengxiang Sword School after circling around the Sun and Jin pillars. Hence, he summoned a disciple of Zhongtai sect to ask him about it. After asking around, he found out that a few days ago, Qin Yuan had already left with his disciples without saying goodbye. They turned to the West Sea realm and returned to the South continent. Even if he chased after them now, he would not be able to make it in time. He thought about it for a while. Apart from the sect leader of Fengxiang sect, the other 5 sword masters were each in charge of a region. Their power was not small either. When Qin Yuan returned to the sect, there would be people from the heavens abode holding the fort and many elders holding him back. It was far from being able to settle the accounts on his own compared to the outside world. Even if he took out enough valuable items, he might not be able to exchange for the star pearl. Hence, he could only give up on the matter. He still did not know who had lost the 2 star pearls that flew to Quantum Inn. If Zhongtai's pearl was still in his hands, he was confident that he could get it. In that case, he would have 4 star pearls in his hands. If the demon under the seal really broke free, it would definitely take the initiative to come to him. He had to be prepared in advance. He looked at the south deeply. With a flick of his sleeves, he soared into the sky and flew away with the wind. After half a day, he returned to the altar in the southwest where the banquet was held. At this moment, the banquet was over. Once the cultivators of the 3 sects left, most of the itinerant cultivators who attended the banquet also left. Only over 100 cultivators of Mount Shinwu remained. He glanced around and saw that sect leader Qiao's carriage was still there. There was no need to go to Hope Voice Mountain to look for him anymore. He stopped the conveyance light and stood outside the main hall. Seeing that their master had returned safely, the Wang sisters were overjoyed and hurriedly came up to greet him. Wang Kaiwei handed over a long wooden box and said, "Disciple has followed master's instructions and has gone to the Qian position dragon pillar to find this item." Zhang Yan glanced at it and put his hands into his sleeves. He nodded and said, "Well done." At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Elder Bai came out of the hall with a smile on his face. As he walked forward, he cupped his hands and said, "Jinren Zhang has returned. Sect leader and madam have been waiting for a long time. Please come in and have a chat with Jinren." Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, "There's no need. I still have important matters to attend to and need to return to the mountain earlier. I just want to ask Elder Bai to pass a message to sect leader Qiao for me. Tell him that I want the treasure of the dragon pillar in his hands. I wonder if he is willing to part with it." Elder Bai's heart skipped a beat. This was a serious matter and he dared not make the decision himself. He said, "Please wait for a moment, Jinren. I will be back soon." He hurried back to the main hall and saw sect leader Qiao and his wife. He then reported the message verbatim. After Qiao Huanzhuan heard it, he was stunned for a moment before he said, "Jinren Zhang really said that?" Elder Bai nodded solemnly. Madame Zhao asked curiously, "Jinren Zhang clearly did not care much about this item before. Why are you interested now?" Qiao Huanzhuan stood up and walked forward. He looked at the painting of the rising sun and waves on the screen behind him. He seemed to have understood something. After a while, he turned around and said with a determined gaze, "Give it to him." Elder Bai reminded him solemnly, "Senior brother, that is the treasure left behind by the dragon pillar. Perhaps it was left behind by the founding master. Even the 3 sects of South Continent have their own treasures. Is it appropriate to give it away like this?" Madame Zhao also said, "Husband, you still need to consider it carefully." Qiao Huanzhuan raised his hand and waved it off. He said, "If it was written by the founding master, it would be fine. I would not give it away even if I had to risk my life. But this is a precious pearl of unknown origin. It even cost the lives of 2 of my disciples. Holding it in my hands is also a hot potato. It might be a good thing to give it to Jinren Zhang." Just now thinking about it carefully, he felt that Zhang Yan did not mention anything else and directly asked for this pearl. That meant that Zhang Yan was willing to accept a favor from him. Zhongtai sect and the 3 sects were threatening them. Jinren Zhang could not act. At this time, they desperately needed an extremely strong helper. As long as they could survive these 100 years, Zhongtai would be able to absorb all of Xian Yu sect's techniques and divine arts. Thus, in his eyes, a strange magic treasure was far less important than Zhang Yan. Elder Bai, however, hesitated. He said, "Sect leader, should I inform senior brother Yan?" Qiao Huanzhuan sat down. He said, "I can make the decision on this matter." Then he looked over. "Junior brother Bai, I also understand what you are worried about. However, Elder Yan has always looked at the big picture. He knows what I have chosen and will definitely understand. Madame Zhao also said, since husband has already decided to give it away, it is better to do it sooner rather than later. If we hesitate, we will not let others look down on us. Qiao Huanzhuan praised, Madam is right. Madame Zhao took out a brass hand warmer from her pouch. The handle was engraved with the fangs. Placing it on the table, she rolled up her sleeves and spread her hands. She said, the precious pearl is in this hand warmer. Elder Bai, take it and give it to him. Chapter 732. In the main hall, Zhang Boyan, Go Su-min, and Sun Chu sat in a circle in front of the Yongming well. At this moment, both Wu and Shin had terrified and bewildered expressions. Earlier, even though they'd intended to deceive the Phoenix River Sword sect and secretly arrange for their disciples to leave, they'd never thought of going against the Phoenix River Sword sect. Now that Shang Qingjun was dead, the spectator pond courtyard had walked onto a path of no return. Left with no choice, they locked up the disciples brought by Shang Qingjun and sealed the mountain gate, not allowing anyone to enter or leave. However, this person sends a letter to the school every 7 days. Even if they can hide it for a while, Fengxiang Sword School will notice something is wrong sooner or later. Go Su-min said with difficulty, Jinren, what should we do now? Zhang Boyan said in a deep voice, if the two of you are willing to lead your disciples to join Hanyuan, my sect leader will help you block Fengxiang Sword School. Go Su-min weighed his words and said, but Shinwu Mountain is in the extreme north, it is more than 10,000 miles away from Quantum. Although it is far away in the Southland, he has heard of Zhang Yan's reputation. But distant water cannot quench present thirst. On the contrary, Fengxiang Sword School is considered close at hand and can be reached in a day. Even if you were to join Hanyuan, what use would it be? Seeing that he is unwilling, Zhang Boyan said, then leave this place and settle down in Shinwu Mountain. Our sect is on good terms with Zhongtai, no matter how powerful Fengxiang Sword School is, they will not pursue us all the way to the Northland. The two of you have seen the situation that day. There must be evil hidden under this seal. Whether we leave or stay, it is only a matter of a thought. Go Su-min hesitated for a long time and finally sighed, this is the only way. Sun Chu said, Senior brother, I have heard that Zhongtai's congratulatory banquet has ended. Sect leader Chen would be returning to the sect in a few days, but if he brought his inner disciples to the north, it'll take at least half a month, and we won't be able to hide the news along the way. If the high sect Fengxiang Sword School gets wind of it, they only need to send one person over to stall us, and then we won't be able to leave. Go Su-min's face turned pale, how did you return so quickly? Zhang Boyan sneered, there's no need for the two of you to be troubled. If the disciples of the Phoenix clan dare to chase after us, just kill them with a single sword strike. Go Su-min was shocked. Shaking his head repeatedly, he said, no, absolutely not. This method is inappropriate. He had been in Fengxiang Sword School for a long time, so even if he wanted to join another school, he wouldn't dare to resist. Shen Qiyu cupped his fists and said, Senior brother, I have an idea for the disciples to split up. As for who can escape, it's all up to heaven's will. Go Su-min thought about it and sighed, this is the only way now. Although this would mean giving up a portion of the disciples, it would also allow the majority of the disciples to escape. He thought for a while and said, then it's decided. Junior Marshal brother, call the disciples to prepare, we'll leave tomorrow. Sun Chu stood up, yes, I'll go and prepare now. Zhang Boyan said, fellow Taoist Shen, wait. Sun Chu immediately stopped. He dared not disregard Zhang Boyan, so he asked with a straight face, does Jinren have anything else to say? Zhang Boyan chuckled, I dare to say that. Fengxiang Sword School must have planted spies in your courtyard. Once the disciples scatter and escape, they'll immediately send a letter to the other schools. Who knows, within a day, someone might come to kill you. Hearing this, Go Su-min was at a loss, we can't go left, we can't go right, what should we do? Zhang Boyan said, actually, this matter is easy. I only need to leave one person here to stand guard, while the other person will bring along a trusted disciple and follow me in advance. Not only will it be difficult for others to notice, but we can also conceal the news of this place. It all depends on whether the two of you are willing. Go Su-min took a breath and said in a deep voice, I'm the Chancellor of Quantamin, I should stay. Junior Marshal brother, you go with Jinren. Senchu jumped up in a hurry and said loudly, absolutely not. Senior Marshal brother is the pillar of the school, how can we lose him? It's better for me to stay. Go Su-min sat up straight and said sternly, Junior Marshal brother, don't argue with me. Now, as the Chancellor, I'm giving you an order. Tomorrow, you will bring the disciples to Mount Shinwu, no mistakes are allowed. Senchu was helpless and sighed. He raised his hand and said, Senchu accepts the order. After the three discussed the details, they went back to make their own arrangements. On the second day, when Zhang Boyan arrived at the hall, he did not see Go Su-min. There was only Senchu sitting in the hall with a young boy beside him. After he sat down, he asked, where is Headmaster Wu? Senchu stood up and bowed to Zhang Boyan. He said, Senior Marshal brother Wu is the headmaster of the school, his cultivation and divine arts are above mine. I can't let him die here for nothing. I've already used the pills left by Senior Marshal brother Zheng to knock him out. Jinren, please take him first. I'll stay here and not let the news leak. Zhang Boyan did not care who stayed and nodded to show that he understood. Senchu brought the child in front of him and said, this is my son, Shindong. Jinren has seen him before. I hope you can bring my son with you. I don't ask for immortality, I just want him to live a happy life. Zhang Boyan glanced at him and said, sure. Senchu touched the child's head, his eyes full of love. He said, child, you can go with Jinren. The child was also very obedient and sensible. He did not make a fuss. After listening to his father, he went to stand beside Zhang Boyan. Zhang Boyan secretly thought, this child may be young, but he has a strong heart and is very sensible. His aptitude is also not bad. If he can be taught a good cultivation method, he will definitely become a great person in the future. Senchu cupped his hands and said, then I'll leave it to Jinren. I've already prepared a flying boat outside, we can go at any time. Zhang Boyan did not say anything more and brought the child outside. He saw a flying boat about 70 to 80 feet long floating in the sky. There were 10 or so disciples on it, most of them were at core transformation. The person in the lead was a pavilion master surnamed Xian. Although this person was the junior brother of Wei Shen and Wu, because he was the former monastery head's in-name disciple, his status was far inferior. However, Zhang Boyan had previously been refining medicine in the courtyard, and most of the medicinal ingredients were taken care of by this person. Zhang Boyan had often interacted with him, so he could be considered to be familiar with him. After leaping onto the flying boat, he glanced at Wu Suyo, who was lying on the couch in the boat, and said, Pavilion Master Qian, please depart quickly. Pavilion Master Qian cupped his hands to Senchu below and said, take care, senior brother. He took out a talisman and shook it. A ball of light appeared under the flying boat, and it quickly flew out. However, no one in the courtyard noticed that after the flying boat left, a colorful fog suddenly spurted out from the ground somewhere in the courtyard. It then turned into a rainbow and flew north. After leaving the mountain gate, Pavilion Master Qian was about to drive the boat north when Zhang Boyan suddenly said, turn around and turn south. Pavilion Master Qian was puzzled. There are only two ways to go to Shinwu Mountain, west and north. But why is Jinren heading south? Zhang Boyan smiled mysteriously and said, we are going south. Pavilion Master Qian was stunned and said, why is that? Zhang Boyan sneered and said, I'm guessing that Fengxiang Sword School will not allow the news of you being banned to spread. They must have many spies, so they cannot act according to the right path. There is a celestial city in the southern vast sea realm that is only 5 to 6 days' journey from here. Although it is under the rule of the Ku Xian sect, it is actually built by the people of the evil sections. I was fortunate enough to go there once. I will hide here for now and wait for the storm to pass before heading north. Pavilion Master Qian frowned and said, is Jinren suspecting that there are people from Fengxiang Sword School around the two senior brothers? Is that why he purposely said he wanted to go north, but he is actually going south? Zhang Boyan glanced at him and said, that's part of it. What do you think, fellow Qian? Pavilion Master Qian nodded and said, Senior Brother Shen told me to listen to Jinren's arrangements along the way. As long as I can bring these disciples to the North Continent safely, I am willing to sacrifice my life. As long as there were disciples, they could enter the sect to cultivate Tao in their next life. However, if even the orthodoxy was broken, it would be completely hopeless. He knew that this trip might not be smooth, so he had long made up his mind that even if he died, these talented disciples would be protected no matter what. In the jade plate of the four seas, He Yizhu sat on a hill surrounded by trees and was sacrificially refining the 9 yellow star pearl. Ever since Zhang Yan came that day, he had been paranoid and was extremely afraid that someone would come to snatch it. Thus, he sacrificially refined this item day and night. Fortunately, there were still 2 more days before he could return to the sect. By then, he could sleep peacefully. While he was deep in thought, there was a sudden rumble. It was as if there was a clap of thunder beside his ears. The entire cloud plate flying ship shook violently, and the table in front of him flipped over. The plates, pots, and cups rolled all over the ground. Because he was caught off guard, he almost fell too. With a thought, a strong wind surrounded his body and stabilized his body. He floated in the air and took out a jade ruler from his sleeve. He said angrily, Elder Kim, what's going on? An elder entered the jade plate and reported, Sect leader, Fengxiang Sword School's Shang Qingjun is blocking the way. Just now, this person is the cause of the commotion. Fengxiang Sword School. Shang Qingjun. What is Qin Yuan trying to do? He Yizhu was furious. He immediately thought that Fengxiang Sword School was coming to snatch the pearl. However, he immediately extinguished this thought. The consequence of a disciple attacking the carriage of another sect's sect leader so brazenly was very likely to be a war between the 2 sections. Based on Qin Yuan's character, he would not be so stupid. He calmed down and waved his sleeve, restoring the table and the plate to its original state. He slowly floated down and said in a cold voice, I heard that this person is arrogant and unruly. Even for this banquet, Qin Yuan did not bring him along. This time, he is either acting on his own initiative or being provoked by someone else. Bring a few more people to capture him. I want to ask how Qin Yuan trains his disciples. Elder Kim bowed and waved his hand. He brought 2 elders down the jade plate. Seeing that Shang Qingjun was expressionless and emitting a strange aura, he frowned and said, My 2 junior brothers, the sect leader has ordered us to capture him alive. The 2 elders nodded and took out their protective treasures. Just as the 3 of them were about to surround him, Shang Qingjun smiled strangely. He suddenly raised his hand and a yellow light shot towards them. There was a loud bang like a thunderbolt. Elder Kim's head was dizzy. At this moment, he felt a little warmth splashing on his cheek. When he turned his head to look, he turned pale with fright. The elder beside him had actually been blasted into pieces along with his treasure in this instant. The opponent had such a powerful treasure, how could he block it? Without saying a word, he left his fellow sect members behind and flew towards the jade plate without turning his head back. Chapter 733. As Elder Kim fled towards the jade plate, he heard another rumble behind him. His body couldn't help but tremble. Even without looking, he knew that if he stayed behind, he wouldn't be able to survive. However, the flight light beneath him didn't slow down at all. In an instant, he returned to the jade plate and knelt before He Yizhu with an ashamed expression. He apologized, Sect Master, I didn't know that Shang Qingjun had brought a powerful transcendent artifact. This subordinate was useless and wasn't his opponent. After losing 2 elders consecutively, Elder Kim fled without a fight. He Yizhu's expression didn't look too good. However, this wasn't the time to pursue the matter. He helped him up and comforted him, I've already seen it. This isn't Elder Kim's fault. Elder Kim took the opportunity to stand up and cupped his hands, Sect Master, this person is really hard to defeat. Furthermore, we don't know if he has a hidden helper. We're only 2 days away from the mountain gate. Why don't we discuss this after we return? He originally had the same intention, but with his status, it wasn't convenient for him to say it. Now that he had a way out, he took advantage of the situation and slammed the table. Damn it. If I had brought the chaotic heaven pill out, why would I be afraid of him? This wasn't nonsense. The chaotic heaven pill was Ku Xin Sect's sect-guarding transcendent artifact. It was personally refined by the sect's founding master. With this artifact on him, he dared to go down and fight. It was just that during this trip, an elder of the sect happened to borrow a pill furnace, so he couldn't bring it out. At this moment, the two of them suddenly felt a tremor beneath their feet. A rumbling sound could be heard as the jade plate of the four seas shook again. It was obvious that Shang Qingjun was exerting his strength to attack again. He snorted and made a hand seal. A constellation diagram appeared on the jade plate of the four seas, forming a restrictive formation. Layers of dense clouds surged out and covered the entire area. Not long after, the formation became stable and motionless. He waved his jade ruler and was about to control the jade plate to leave when he heard a voice coming from below. He Zhangmen, please come out and meet me. Otherwise, I'll kill all of you. He was startled, and then anger appeared in his eyes. Other than the three elders, there were hundreds of them. Usually, when the Dongxing sect fought against each other, they would be cautious and rarely make things difficult for the younger generation. They didn't expect that the other party would use this as a threat. Now that things had come to this, he had no choice but to show up. He said coldly, Elder Kim, take charge of the array pivot for me. I'll go meet him personally. Elder Kim was very anxious. He grabbed his sleeve and tried to dissuade him. Sect leader, you can't. He flung him off and said impatiently, there's no need to say anything more. Hundreds of lives are at stake, how can I sit back and do nothing? If it was someone else here and they suddenly encountered a strong enemy, they would still be able to protect themselves and retreat. However, as the sect leader of a sect, he knew that his sect was in trouble, yet he ignored it and left. Not only would he lose face, it would also be difficult for him to sit in this position in the future. Elder Kim also understood the logic behind this. He could only say, then sect leader, you must be careful of his talisman. He nodded and said, Elder Kim, you worry too much. I have the good auspicious pill to protect me. Even if I can't win, I can still escape. He raised his finger and pointed. A pearl-like pill flew out and landed on the top of his head. Once the pill appeared in mid-air, it started to spin rapidly. Streaks of jade-colored light shone down and covered his whole body. Then, he waved his jade ruler and went down to the jade plate. When he reached the bottom, he turned around and saw that the hundreds of people were wrapped up in a yellow fog. They were like insects in a cocoon. He suppressed his anger and said in a deep voice, Shang Qingjun, why did you attack my mount and kill my sect members? Are you trying to start a war between the two sects? Facing his questioning, Shang Qingjun acted as if nothing had happened. He only slowly stretched out his hand and said, hand over the elemental beads and I'll spare your lives. When He heard this, he couldn't help but stare at his face. He said, I was wondering why. So you're here for the orb. What if I don't hand it over? As he said this, he took out a copper bell from his sleeve and hid it in his sleeve. Shang Qingjun raised his hand. The yellow fog not far away twisted and in a split second, dozens of people were crushed into a bloody pulp. He said angrily, stop. Shang Qingjun said expressionlessly, if you don't hand over the elemental beads, this will be your outcome. He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. If that's the case, then, give me your life. He suddenly shouted and took out the copper bell in his hand. He lifted the lid and waved it at Shang Qingjun. In an instant, a cluster of clear light poured down. Shang Qingjun didn't expect him to suddenly make a move. He stood there in a daze and was immediately hit by the clear light. He was overjoyed. This treasure had the effect of cutting off spiritual vigor. Once a cultivator was hit by it, he couldn't use any talisman or Taoist techniques anymore. Just as he was about to order his men to capture him, he saw the figure below slowly disappear. Then, it turned into a 4 feet long black sword. The corner of his eyes twitched. How could he not know that he had been tricked? He hurriedly retreated. But it was already too late. 2 rays of yellow light came attacking from above. With a bang, it hit his body and he couldn't help but tremble violently. Luckily, he had the protection of the good auspicious pill. Although the light was fierce, it didn't hurt him. But even so, a layer of the treasure light was shaken off. Seeing that he couldn't take it anymore, he immediately wanted to retreat. He looked up and saw that the 2 yellow rays above him were blocking the way back to the jade plate. He roared and activated the secret technique of the Ku Xian sect. 3 flames leaped out from the high cloud above him. They were green, white, and red in color. They gathered in the middle and intertwined into a ball. Immediately, a blazing cloud of fire that was 1,000 feet wide was formed, trying to break open a path. But the 2 rays of yellow light only rushed forward lightly and swept away the flames. Then, they crossed each other like a pair of scissors. The treasure light on Heizhu's body was already fading at a speed visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, he couldn't help but panic. He could only say loudly, "Wait, I'm willing to give you the treasure bead. But you have to let me go." Shang Qingjun spread out his hand and said, "Give it to me." Heizhu had no choice but to take out the 9 yellow bead. Just when he wanted to state some conditions, he felt that his hand was empty. The bead had already flown away. Shang Qingjun opened his mouth and swallowed the bead. He didn't care about him anymore and flew away. But just as he broke through the high cloud and reached the high heaven, the magic sword suddenly trembled and broke free from his mana control. A voice in the sword said angrily, "Guiyuan, why didn't you kill them all?" The person called Guiyuan said plainly, "Heizhu is a sect master. If he was killed, it would be too big of a problem. It's very easy to provoke the people from the heavenly abode behind him. My body is still sealed, so I don't want to cause any trouble." The voice in the sword said again, "But you said that as long as I help you with the sword, you won't implicate my sect. Just now, you're clearly trying to frame me." Guiyuan said calmly, "Then what do you want? If you don't resolve this matter, I won't help you." Guiyuan's voice suddenly turned cold. He said, "Do you really think that I can't do anything without you?" The person in the sword was also unyielding. He said, "You said the appearance of the person holding the bead. According to my deduction, he should be the person in charge of the celestial city of Mount Shenwu, Priest Zhang. This person's sword escape technique is brilliant. If I don't help you with my magic sword, don't even think about taking him down." Guiyuan's eyes darkened. He said, "Is this person really as powerful as you say?" The person in the sword only snorted. Guiyuan said in a low voice, "The 4 C's jade plate's restriction is strong. Heizhu is already like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. There's no chance to kill him. If worst comes to worst, I'll help your Fengxiang sword school after your 2 sects fight." After saying this, he waited for a while. Seeing that the person in the sword did not say anything, it was obvious that he agreed. A strange smile appeared on his face. He stretched out his hand to summon the sword. Then, he guided a swift escape light and flew toward the North Continent. 5 days later, Hongyu Mountain, Guangqi Peak. The soaring hall was shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere at the moment. Chen Yuan's expression was solemn. He looked at the 4 elders and said, "I've summoned all of you here to inform you of something. Just now, He Zhangmen sent someone to say that Brother Shang killed 2 of his elders and hundreds of people on his way. If you don't hand over Shang Qingjun and give him a satisfactory explanation, he'll personally come here with more than 10,000 people to seek justice." As soon as he said this, the elders' faces were filled with disbelief. Rainbow Sword Master Zhu Xian had a look of disbelief on his face. He said, "I know Brother Shang's abilities very well. The accompanying elders of Ku Xian sect might not be his match, but it's absolutely impossible for him to kill He Zhangmen and his hundreds of people. Great Elder Long Jingxing cupped his hands and said, "Sect leader, is there a misunderstanding? Isn't Brother Shang in Quantamin? Why would he kill He Zhangmen halfway?" Chen Yuan said in a deep voice, "I'm worried about this. What if it's really Brother Shang's doing?" Long Jingxing widened his eyes and said, "Sect leader, you mean it's that seal?" He seemed to know that he had said something wrong and quickly stopped. However, how could the elders not figure out the meaning behind his words? They couldn't help but look at each other. Shang Qingjun didn't have such an ability, but if he took the opportunity when they were attending the banquet in Northern Continent and secretly took the item, it would be very hard to say. Chen Yuan looked to one side and said, "Elder Su, has Brother Shang sent any letter recently?" Elder Su replied, "Letters are only sent every 7 days. If there's nothing, they should arrive today." Chen Yuan said resolutely, "There's no need to wait. Elder Su, you go to Quantamin immediately and don't investigate this matter." Fengxiang Sword School had spent over 100 years for that seal, so there must be no mistakes. Elder Su solemnly cupped his fists and said, "I will obey your order." Long Jingxing stroked his beard and said, "The situation is really hard to predict now, but we still have to be wary of Ku Xian sect's revenge. It's not appropriate for Elder Su to go alone. It's better to send another person to go with him." Chen Yuan nodded and said, "That's right. We must be careful. Junior brother Zhu, you go with Elder Su." Zhu Xian did not accept the order immediately. Instead, he raised his head and said, "If we meet Brother Shang, what should we do?" Chen Yuan was silent for a moment. He untied a magic sword from his waist and threw it down. He said, "We must first investigate if he is the one who did the Ku Xian sect incident. If he is really the culprit, ask him if he is willing to come back. If he is willing, treat him nicely and calm him down. If he is unwilling, use my imperial sword to cut him down and bring his head back." Chapter 734. After Sect Master Qiao and his wife gave him the 9 yellow star bead, they tried their best to invite Zhang Yan to visit them. Zhang Yan found it hard to refuse their kindness, so he stayed at Hope Voice Mountain for 3 days before leaving. He brought the Wang sisters and hundreds of disciples back to the mountain. A few days later, he returned to Tsangzhu Peak. However, he didn't cultivate in seclusion like before. Instead, he brought his disciple, Fu Baoxing, to the Beima Ocean world. Fu Baoxing was now in the middle of the 2nd level of the Mystic Light realm, so he could travel on a Mystic Light long ago. However, there was the threat of the Python tribe in the Beima Ocean. Ever since the Whirlpool calamity, the Godly House Mountain had been sealed, and no cultivators from the Godly House Mountain had come here. Even he was no exception. This was his first time here, so he couldn't help but look around. Waves rolled and jade waves surged. Vaguely, he could see many beautiful girls riding on sharks, singing and laughing, chasing and playing. However, in his eyes, he could see that these girls were not humans, but demonic cultivators in the water. His expression became serious, and he said, "Master, are these girls the subordinates of the Python tribe?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That's not true." He took out a banner and handed it to Fu Baoxing. He said, "Disciple, go talk to them and call Lu Changsu out to see me." Fu Baoxing bowed, took the banner, and flew down. The girls didn't care when they saw a mystic light coming. One of them, who was tall and had a pair of charming eyes, jumped out of the water and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "This is the Godly House Mountain world, it's not a place without a master. I wonder which immortal master has come here, please tell me why you are here." Fu Baoxing waved the banner and said loudly, "I'm here on my master's orders, please ask Lu Changsu to come out and talk." The female demon saw that when he waved the banner in his hand, she couldn't help but want to bow down and worship him. She could vaguely guess his origin, so she forced herself to calm down and bowed. "So you're here, I'll go and call General Lu over." Ever since Lu Changsu was put into the ocean by Zhang Yan to control the Yao tribe, he was like a fish in the water. In the past dozens of years, many of the original 200,000 or so demons had died of old age. However, other than the Python tribe, they did not have any major enemies. After living on the sea for a long time, the number of their people did not decrease, but instead increased, gradually showing signs of prosperity. Every few years, he would pick some of his clansmen with good aptitudes and send them to the mountain gate of the divine house to be servants and deacons as a sign of respect. At this moment, he was training his demon soldiers in the sea. When he heard someone reporting that a cultivator was coming with a banner, he immediately set off towards the sea. When he emerged from the water, he saw that the person was a young and elegant cultivator with his hair tied up, but he had never seen him before. However, he had never seen him before. It was the Mu Changsu. Although the other party was only at the mystic light realm, he didn't dare to be careless. He cupped his fists and said, "May I know how to address you in Jinren Zhang?" Fu Baoxing returned the greeting and said, "I am Fu Baoxing, the 8th disciple of my master." Lu Changsu bowed again and said, "I'm Fu Baoxing, master's 8th disciple." Lu Changsu bowed again and said passionately, "So it's young master, sorry for not going out to greet you." However, at this moment, he had ordered his disciple to come here, which meant that this child was extremely valued. How could he dare to offend him? Even his expression carried a hint of fawning. Fu Baoxing said, "My benevolent teacher is in the clouds, would General Lu please come with me to see him?" Having said that, he turned around and headed towards the sky. Hearing that Zhang Yan was here, Lu Changsu was shocked and quickly tidied up his robe. He followed Zhang Yan. When he got to the top of the clouds, he saw a Taoist standing on the clouds. His body shook, and he knelt down. "Lu Changsu greets Lord." Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and said, "You may rise." Only then did Lu Changsu stand up, but he lowered his head in a respectful manner. Zhang Yan pointed at Fu Baoxing and said, "You have seen my disciple. If he comes to give me an order in the future, you must not disobey him." Lu Changsu glanced at Fu Baoxing, and a thought flashed through his mind as he thought to himself, "The manor head is a disciple of the Dark Azure sect and will have to return to the sect one day. Could it be that this young master will be the one controlling us in the future? Then I will have to serve him carefully." He cupped his hands and said respectfully, "I will obey." Zhang Yan nodded his head and said, "For the past few decades, you've controlled hundreds of thousands of demons, yet you've never caused any trouble to the people. You're strict in your governance, and you've controlled them well. You've also opened more than 10 shellfish farms, and helped me collect millions of seashells. It's really hard to come by. What do you think I should give you?" Lu Changsu quickly expressed his loyalty and said, "Lord, this is not the work of me alone. If it wasn't for the help of dozens of demon tribes, this situation would not have happened." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Don't talk about this. What do you need? Tell me quickly. If you don't, I won't bother you anymore." Lu Changsu stopped talking. He thought for a while and said, "I have been wandering in the core transformation realm for a long time, but I have no cultivation technique to practice. Can I ask Lord to give me a cultivation technique? If I am lucky enough to break through in the future, my lifespan will be extended by 1,000 years, and I will be able to continue serving Lord." After he finished speaking, he bowed and did not get up for a long time. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "You are from the Reef Prefecture, and the cultivation technique you practice is also superior. If someone else came to ask for it, it would be difficult for me, but you are fine. Today, I will teach you a cultivation technique. Although it cannot be compared to the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures of Qinsong, it will be enough to help you cultivate Yuanying." As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and pointed at Lu Changsu's forehead, passing a cultivation technique to him. After Lu Changsu received the cultivation technique, he checked it and knew that what Zhang Yan said was true. He was overjoyed and quickly kowtowed to thank Zhang Yan. In fact, to cultivate Yuanying, other than the cultivation technique, he also needed a lot of external help. It would be difficult for him to cultivate it in the East Flower Continent or the East Sea. Fortunately, there were many celestial cities in the East Victory Continent, so he could only use spirit seashells to exchange for them. At this time, Zhang Yan said, "There is another matter I need you to do." Lu Changsu said loudly, "Please instruct me, chief." Zhang Yan said, "After your tribe settled here, the number of people has increased. I don't want to use the moon's sleeping banner of 10,000 beasts to restrain you anymore, so I want to open a path in the Shinwu mountain that connects to the sea. This way, your tribe can come to the mountain at any time." Lu Changsu calculated for a while and said, "Right now, we have more than 1,000,000 people and 270,000 demon soldiers. If we work day and night, we can open up the mountain path in a year." However, Zhang Yan waved his sleeves and said, "There is no need to go through so much trouble. Go to the side with Huixing and wait for my orders." The two of them said yes and stood far away. Zhang Yan arrived above the clouds and aimed at a cliff. He circulated the 5 elements escape technique and grabbed downwards. In an instant, the earth and rocks were moved, and with another exertion of force, a rumbling sound was heard. The cliff that was 100 zhang long was actually moved to another place. The seawater surged in a split second, causing jade waves to surge up to 1,000 feet, and the collision of the sea and mountain roared like thunder. This place was quite far from the center of the Shinwu mountain. Even if his transcendence energy was strong, he would not be able to open up a path in less than a month. Therefore, he did not move it with brute force. Instead, he used a trick. Every time he moved it, there would be ravines, stone crevices, and rivers. Because it saved him a lot of effort, it only took him half a day to open up a shallow path. Fu Baoxing was dazzled and envious. He thought to himself, "I wonder when I will be able to cultivate Master's supernatural power." Lu Changsu was also dumbfounded. He looked at Zhang Yan with respect. Zhang Yan used another few hours to travel around the mountain on his sword ray before returning to the cliff. He waved his hand and called Lu Changsu over. He pointed down and said, "Follow this path and open up the river." "How long will it take for you to open up the mountain path?" Lu Changsu looked around and saw that there were still some places in the ravines that were connected like lotus roots. However, the main path had been opened up, and the rest was easy. He said, 20 days at most. Zhang Yan said, "I will only give you 15 days. Lu Changsu did not dare to disobey. He said sternly, "As you wish." He hesitated for a moment, then carefully asked, "Man or head, may I ask if there's a great enemy coming to attack?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "It's better to be safe than sorry." He opened up this waterway to deal with the sealed monsters that could attack at any time. However, his intention was not only for the hundreds of thousands of demon soldiers, but also to make it easier for the dragon carp to travel secretly. After all, it was a great monster in the water and was not good at flying on land. There was no lake or sea in the Shinwu mountain for it to stay. In this way, it could be used as a chess piece to win the battle by surprise at a critical moment. 10 days later, a black light flew over from the sky. It circled around the Shinwu mountain a few times before retreating far away. It landed on a mound 100 miles away, and a figure appeared. It was Guiyuan Jun who had taken over Shang Qingjuan's body. He picked up the magic sword in his hand and said with a displeased expression, "This Mount Shinwu is full of array doors, and every step is protected by restrictions. There is no way to enter or exit. You've made me waste a lot of effort. Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" A resentful voice came from the sword. "You can't blame me for this. The Dongxing continent has always only set up restrictions in the celestial cities. Even in the mountains, there are only a few altars. Who would know that the Shinwu mountain is a different species? You have the pearl with you, how can these restrictions stop you?" Lord Guiyuanjun said coldly, "If I was at my peak, I wouldn't care about this kind of prohibition. But now, I'm borrowing your body to do things. If I were to charge in from the front, I'm afraid my mana would be exhausted before I could even reach Cangzhou Peak." The Pearl of Life contained the 9 drops of blood that he had hidden in the past. With them, he could use the body that was sealed. It was because of this blood essence that the spirit returning sect treated the 9 natal pearls as a treasure. But every time the Pearl of Life was used, the blood would decrease. If it was used up, it would be completely useless. Therefore, he was not willing to use it easily. The voice in the sword suddenly said, I have a way. If Daoist Zhang does not come out, you can force him out. Progenitor Guo's interest was piqued and he asked, how? Just send a challenge. Just say that you want to fight him. As the leader of a sect, he will not reject you. Guo Yuanjun said slowly, previously, you rejected me in every way. Why are you helping me now? The person in the sword snorted, if your scheme here fails, you might turn around and look for trouble with my Fengxiang sword sect. Why don't you think of a way to let you fight that Daoist Zhang here? If you lose, wouldn't I be able to be free earlier? Guo Yuanjun was not angry. He nodded and said, that makes sense. But once I send the challenge, the Ku Xian sect and the Fengxiang sword school will know that I am here. They will send people to kill me. Is this your real intention? Chapter 735. The origin spirit in the sword saw that his intention was exposed by Guo Yuanjun, and could not help but become angry, and said, that's right, that's my intention, what are you going to do? Guo Yuanjun smiled strangely, and said, that's a good idea, but you're wrong about one thing. Even if the Yuanying cultivators traveled from the top of the sky, it would take at least half a month to get here from the state of South to here. By then, I would have already snatched the Yuanying bead, and it would not be a problem even if the news were to be leaked. The origin spirit in the sword was stunned, he really did not think of that, and could not help but feel a little regretful. Guo Yuanjun rummaged through the sleeves of this body for a while, and found a stack of flying talismans. He took out one, and threw the rest away. Using his finger as a pen, he used his mana to activate spiritual vigor, and wrote down the battle invitation. Then, he shouted to somewhere in the mountain, I have a letter for your master, quickly come and receive it. There were altars everywhere in the Shinwu mountain, and the disciples on duty had long noticed that there were people flying in the sky, but because the person's cultivation experience was too high, they did not go out to ask questions. Hearing that the person wanted to send a letter, after a discussion among the 3 disciples, one of them came out of the forbidden formation on a flying boat, and said to him with a fist salute, may I ask who you are? I'll go back to pass the message. Guo Yuanjun did not answer, and with a swing of his hand, he threw the letter down, and said, just send it to your master. The disciple guessed that it was not a small matter, and he returned to the formation. When he arrived at the altar, he picked up the mallet, and hit a small bell hanging there for 17 or 18 times. A crane's cry was heard, and a white-feathered crane flew over from afar. The disciple held up his hand, and said, there's a letter from outside the mountain for the headmaster, please pass it on, fairy crane. The white crane did not stop. Instead, it swept past him, and conveniently picked up the letter with its long beak. Then, it spread its wings, and flew straight up to Zhangzhou Peak. She flew very fast, and in less than an hour, she arrived at the peak. She landed and transformed into a young girl, holding the letter in her arms, and said with a clear voice, Celestial Master Jing. There's a letter from outside the mountain, saying that it's for sect leader to read. After waiting for a moment, Jing Yu walked out of the cave. He came up to take the letter, flipped through it, and asked a few questions before waving his hand at him. The girl bowed. He transformed back into the body of a red-crowned crane and let out a soft cry. Then, he flapped his wings and flew down the mountain. Jing Yu turned around and entered the cave. He came to the main hall and said to Zhang Yan, who was sitting on the couch with his eyes closed, Master, I've brought the letter. Zhang Yan opened his eyes. Without any movement, the letter flew up and opened in front of him. He looked over and realized that it was a letter of challenge. The person who challenged him said that he was willing to bet 4 9 yellow star beads and invited him to fight 3 days later. As for the location of the duel, it was up to him to choose. At the place of signature, it was written, Fengxiang Sword School Shang Qingjun, these 7 words. After reading it, he raised his eyebrows and chuckled softly. There was a hint of playfulness in his expression. Jing Yu came up and asked in a low voice, Master, is there something wrong? Zhang Yan withdrew his mana and let the letter fall on the table in front of him. He said, "Take a look." Jing Yu carefully took a look and said curiously, "Shang Qingjun. But there's a mistake. Wasn't this person killed by Jinren with his supernatural power a month ago?" Zhang Yan snorted and said, "After that, this person's corpse disappeared mysteriously. Now he came to me to issue a letter of challenge. Isn't it strange?" Jing Yu revealed a shocked expression and said, "Master, could it be that Shang Qingjun is the demon that was sealed by the founding master?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "It's very possible." Jing Yu said nervously, "Master is going to accept the challenge?" A ray of light appeared in Zhang Yan's eyes and he said lightly, "Even if he doesn't come, I will still go find him." "Where is he?" "I heard that he is still outside the mountain." Zhang Yan stood up and looked outside the mountain. He said, "I will go and meet him now." Jing Yu said, "The letter says that the date of the challenge is 3 days later." Zhang Yan said coldly, "Since he is under my sect, how can he have the final say?" He waved his sleeves and floated out of the cave along with the strong wind. With another sway, a ray of sword light appeared out of the mountain gate. After Guiyuanjun sent out the letter of challenge, he was still waiting for a reply outside the mountain. Not long after, he saw the spiritual vigor of the formation below him surging. He thought that it was the person who replied to the letter coming out. But suddenly, he saw a huge hand made of muddy yellow mist climbing up from below and grabbing towards him. He was instantly shocked. He hurriedly turned his body and forcefully dodged to one side. But the huge hand turned slightly and changed from a grab to a slap, still attacking him. Looking at this pair of huge hands, yellow smoke billowed and covered a radius of a few miles. If Guiyuanjun were to use his sword now, he would be able to easily avoid it. But the sword beside him had an owner. When he used it, he needed the cooperation of Shang Qingjun's primordial spirit to be able to use it. It was fine to use it normally, but in a serious fight, there was no time to use it. He could only sway his body and 2 rays of yellow light flew up from his back and rushed up. With a bang, the big hands were shattered and a ray of light poured down from the top of his head. Just as he was about to jump out, a dozen sword rays suddenly leaped out from the yellow mist and attacked from different directions. They were as fast as lightning and arrived in front of him in a blink of an eye. He was caught unprepared. In a hurry, he used his strength and a bead flew out of the fontanelle. It released a ball of yellow light and covered his entire body, blocking off all the sword rays. Before he could pull his hand out to counterattack, he suddenly felt a huge force on his body. It was as if he was being pressed down by a mountain. He immediately knew that he was trapped by a supernatural power. Fortunately, Shang Qingjun had mentioned that the other party seemed to have a technique to seal the heaven and earth. Hence, he was already prepared for it. The natal pearl of life spun and messed up the spiritual opportunity. Then, a strong wind blew and he wanted to go far away. However, at this moment, the 10 over sword gleams entangled him again. Guiyuanjun had no choice but to take out the bead again. But because of that, he was also stuck on the same spot. Seeing that the yellow mist above him had no way to gather in the middle and that the big hand was about to gather again, he felt a headache coming on. He thought, "I have miscalculated. This person's supernatural power and spells are far beyond that of a normal Yuanian cultivator. It's hard for me to defeat him with this body. I'm in front of his mountain gate, it's not a good idea to fight for a long time. It's better to leave as soon as possible." He was also aware of the situation. Although the fight was not long, he could even see the opponent's face. It was obvious that he had no chance of winning. So he released the bead and shook off the flying swords. He dropped down and in a flash, he dropped 1,000 feet. When he landed on the ground, he turned into a yellow smoke and drilled downwards. In a blink of an eye, he was nowhere to be seen. Not long after he escaped, the spiritual vigor in the sky disappeared. The yellow smoke and the sword rays retracted. Zhang Yan appeared and used his eyesight to sweep a few glances below. It seemed like the opponent was not a weakling either. Seeing that the situation was not right, he escaped. If this person escaped from the sky, he was confident that he could catch up to him. But it was different if he escaped underground. Even though he had the earth escape technique, there were many methods that he could not use. On the contrary, he did not know the opponent's background, so he could not give chase rashly. There was a huge battle here. Although it was only for a short moment, it alarmed the various sects of Mount Shinwu. Someone had already informed the sections. Song Chuyuan and Tang Jin had been summoned back from the Celestial City by Zhang Yan. When they heard the news, they immediately flew out on flying lights. When they arrived at this place, they saw that Zhang Yan was floating alone in the air. The enemy who attacked had already disappeared. The two of them went forward together. They asked, "Manor Master, may I know who is the invader?" Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "The enemy is a demon. It has the ability to possess a body. The two of you, pass down my order. These few days, we must be careful. All cultivators of Mount Shinwu are not allowed to leave the mountain. If there is an external envoy, those who have not been verified are not allowed to enter." Seeing that he was serious, the two of them braced themselves and accepted the order. They cupped their hands and went back to make arrangements. 100 miles away, a wisp of light yellow smoke rose from the ground. When it reached a height of about 3 feet, Guiyuan Jun walked out with his face covered in dust. He waved his sleeves to disperse the smoke. He looked back at the majestic mountain in the north, his eyes a little gloomy. He originally thought that no matter how powerful Zhang Yan was, he would only be on par with Heizhu, the head of Ku Xian sect. His 4 natal pearls would be enough to restrain him. But when they really fought, he realized that something was wrong. Just now, he had not even seen the opponent's shadow. Instead, he had used up a lot of his essence. It could be said that the gains did not make up for the losses. He calculated in his heart, "This road is blocked. I might as well go find the natal pearl that fell into the hands of Fengxiang Sword School. But the head Qin Yuan is hiding in the mountain gate and is guarded by the Dong Tianjinren. As long as I get close, I will definitely be discovered." He thought again and suddenly came up with a plan. His eyes flashed and he rode the flying light back. Not long after, he arrived in front of Mount Shinwu and said loudly, "Just now I was careless and let you succeed. After a month, I will recover from my injuries and come back to meet you." After saying that, he flicked his sleeves and went into the high cloud. At this moment, Zhang Yan had just returned to the cave and sat down. When the disciple passed the words to the inner room, Jingyu scolded, "This person is really shameless. This person is really shameless." Just now, he was no match for Master and fled in panic. Now, he is here to boast. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and said, "It is not that simple. Just now, although he fled, he is not injured. If that is the case, he must have another purpose." Jingyu said, "He said 1 month as the deadline. Perhaps he can find some talisman in this period of time." Zhang Yan smiled and shook his head, "No, the drunkard's intention is not wine. His words are not for me to hear." Jingyu was puzzled, "Then who is it for?" Zhang Yan raised his finger and gently knocked on the table. He suddenly said, "How long does it take for the 3 southern sects to travel from Nanzhou to my Shinwu?" Jingyu said without hesitation, "If it is a Yuanian cultivator, 20 to 30 days would be enough." As soon as he said this, he came back to his senses and said, "Master is saying." Zhang Yan nodded and said with a smile, "Yes or no, we will know in a few days." In less than 10 days, the news of the battle between Zhang Yan and Shang Qingjun was spread out. Even the arranged battle in a month's time was known to everyone. When Fengxiang sect master Qin Yuan received the news, he immediately ordered people to find First Elder Long Jingcheng for a discussion. "Elder Long, no wonder we couldn't find Brother Shang. He ran to the Shinwu mountain. It must be for the pearl in Priest Zhang's hands." Long Jingcheng's expression was solemn. "Sect master, just now, there is a spy in Ku Xian sect reporting that Heizhu is gathering people to surround and kill Brother Shang." Chen Yuan's expression became solemn. "Brother Shang knows a lot of secrets. He must not fall into the hands of Ku Xian sect. Moreover, it is not his turn to punish my Fengxiang Sword School's disciple. He pointed outside the hall. Quickly give the order to summon the city lords and sect masters of the various immortal cities to see me. No excuses are allowed. Within 3 days, all of them must rush over. Those who disobey will be punished as disobeying orders. Chapter 736. 3 days later, Qin Yuan selected 9 celestial cities castellans, Zhiga swordmaster Su Gongming, Yingyang swordmaster Long Jingcheng, a total of 12 people, and went to the extreme heaven, borrowing the strong wind to go to the Shenwu mountain. The rest were left to guard the mountain. Qin Yuan was silent along the way. The person he sent to Quantumin had sent a letter back, saying that the seal had not been broken. However, Sect Master Go Su Min had abandoned the school, and no one knew where she went. Even Priest Zhang, whom Shang Qingjun mentioned several times in his letters, had also left. Pavilion Master Sun Chu, on the other hand, took a pill and committed suicide one day before they arrived. After asking the spies in the school, they found out that Shang Qingjun seemed to have had a conflict with Quantumin, but because the incident happened outside the school, and it ended very quickly, no one was clear about the specific situation. Qin Yuan was worried that if the other 3 sects found out about the seal, they would definitely come looking for them. How could they let Fengxiang Sword School monopolize it? Long Jingqing saw his gloomy expression and understood what he was worried about, so he advised, Sect Master, don't worry. Zhu Shidi has already seen that the seal will be broken in at most 10 days. As long as we can drag this period of time, even if others find out, we won't have to be afraid. Qin Yuan nodded and said, let's hope it's as Elder Long said. At this moment, a small sword suddenly flew over. Long Jingqing noticed it and stretched out his hand to grab it. He took out the silk cloth from the sword hilt and shook it open to take a look. He raised his head and said, Sect Master, Ku Xin sect left a day ago. Qin Yuan said, how many people did he bring this time? Only 10 people, a little less than us. Qin Yuan's face did not show anything, but his mood was slightly relaxed. In comparison, he had more people in his hands, so he had the upper hand. Long Jingqing asked in a low voice, Sect Master, are you going to capture Brother Shang immediately when you arrive there, or wait until the winner is decided after the 2 of them fight? Qin Yuan said in a low voice, since there is a fight, we should follow the rules. How can Fengxiang Sword School interfere? It won't be too late to capture him after the 2 of them fight. He sighed again. I've seen that Daoist Zhang at the banquet, and he's indeed extraordinary. Junior apprentice Brother Shang could defeat He Yizhu's group of 100, and yet he's still not a match for this person. Long Jingqing, however, was not convinced. He snorted and said, that priest Zhang must have relied on something else to have such ability. Qin Yuan looked over and asked, why do you think so? Long Jingqing said, I am not speaking nonsense. I heard that Mao Wuwei exchanged the pearl in his hand with that Daoist Zhang. Qiao Huanzhuan tried to please this person many times, so that item could not be kept. Sect Master, think about it, at least 3 precious pearls are in his hands, plus his supernatural power and Dao techniques are not ordinary, so it is reasonable for him to defeat Brother Shang. Qin Yuan frowned and said, but I tried many times, but I still could not use this treasure. Later on, I asked Master Gan, and he said that this item needs to be nourished by the blood of many Yuanian cultivators to be used, and the side effects are not shallow. He advised me to seal this item and not to use it recklessly. Even our Fengxiang Sword School could not do it, so how can a small Shenwu mountain do it? Long Jingqing lowered his head and said, that is unknown, maybe he has some other secret technique. It is a pity that when the 2 of them fought, there was no outsider at the scene, so we could not see the specific situation, or else we would be able to see a thing or 2. Qin Yuan said, wait till we catch Shang Qingjun, then we will know. Feng Xiang and the rest flew for more than 20 days, and the majestic mountain of Shenwu Mountain that pierced through the clouds could be seen. Qin Yuan turned around and saw that everyone's faces were filled with fatigue. As they were afraid of missing out on the battle between the 2 of them, they did not stop for even a moment to rest along the way, relying entirely on the support of medicinal pills. Now that they were about to reach their destination, he said, Elder Long, come and take care of the strong wind, everyone can rest for a while." Elder Long immediately accepted the order and went to a high place. The 3 astral clouds above his head rotated, and he took out a spell to slowly repel the astral wind. Everyone gathered in one place, took out their instruments and sat down, then took out pills and consumed them to recover their mana. Long Jingxing saw his junior apprentice brother Su Gongming standing guard at the side, so he said with a smile, "Junior apprentice brother, you don't have to stand guard here. This is above the extreme heaven, you can see everything at a glance, even if someone comes, there is no need to be so anxious. We still have to hurry, you should go and rest first." When Su Gongming heard that, he hesitated for a moment, but he also felt that what Long Jingxing said was reasonable, so he cupped his hands and said, "I will replace senior apprentice brother later." With a shake of his hand, he released a treasure boat and went into the inner room. Maybe it was out of habit, but he still put down the curtain and activated the restriction, only then did he rest at ease and rest. Long Jingxing shook his head and smiled, he thought to himself, "This junior apprentice brother Su is too careful." Just as this thought appeared in his mind, he suddenly frowned and exclaimed in surprise. It turned out that the astral wind outside had suddenly become much stronger. At this moment, everyone was adjusting their breathing, so they could not make any mistakes. He quickly used his mana to try and calm the astral wind, but when he tried, he realized that the spiritual vigor was stagnant, and he could not circulate it. He could not help but be shocked, and when he wanted to use another layer of mana, the astral wind suddenly disappeared without a trace. He had no choice but to retract his mana, but at this moment, a strong force suddenly rushed over, and he was caught off guard, so he could not maintain his mana. He exclaimed, "Everyone, be careful." Without his support, the astral wind blew in, and everyone was originally relaxed, so they did not have time to defend themselves. They were immediately wrapped up by the surging wind, and all of them were dizzy. Only Su Gongming's boat was protected by the restriction, so he did not look too bad, but he was also blown far away by the wind. Chen Yuan's reaction was the fastest. After he got rid of the astral wind, he immediately used his mana to try and calm the turbulence down, but the wind was too strong, and he could not do anything for a while, so he said, "Everyone, don't panic, quickly follow me down to the extreme sky." Amidst the whistling wind, his voice could be heard clearly. After everyone heard it, they also came back to their senses, and just when they were about to do as he said, they were all shocked when they tried. The spiritual vigor around them was disturbed by someone, and the astral wind swept and swirled like a tide, and at this moment, they could not break through the astral clouds at all. Long Jingxing also felt that something was wrong, but he still did not dare to believe that someone dared to make a move here. Because of the astral wind raging above the extreme sky, if one did not calm down to control it, he would not even be able to stabilize his body, and regardless of whether it was attacking or defending, it would be several times more difficult. If he did not handle it well, it would be a small matter if he died, but his primordial spirit would immediately be crushed on the spot. At this moment, in a place where there was no one, 3 crystal beads suddenly appeared, turned into 3 rays of yellow light, and flew towards a celestial city lord nearby. Just now, that person had already used a magic treasure to protect himself, but he could not withstand the attack of the beads at all. There was a thunderous sound in the air, and the magic treasure was already broken, and his head was cracked open, and he died. The yellow light came up and wrapped around him, swallowing all his tendons, blood, bones, and flesh. With this nourishment, the light became a little brighter than before, and turned around to rush towards another person. Because everyone was blown away by the astral wind, and they could not even take care of themselves, they only noticed the change in this place when there was a sound. A divine light appeared in Chen Yuan's eyes, and he shouted fiercely. He pointed his hand, and the profound sword on his waist flew out in an instant, bringing along a ray of bright light, traversing a few miles, and rushed in front of the yellow light, and collided with it from afar. With a cracking sound, as if gold and jade had shattered, the magic sword trembled, and was shaken back. The 3 rays of yellow light were also blocked, and they were forced to show their original appearance. He took a careful look and saw that it was 3 round pearls that were brilliant like crystal, and they were enshrouded in mist and mist. They seemed like immortal treasures on the outside, yet they were unable to conceal the waves of evil and fishy aura coming from them. He was stunned, and then he immediately understood what they were. He looked around and said angrily, "Shang Qingjun, are you the one causing mischief?" However, no one answered him. The 3 crystal pearls split up and actually split into 3 different directions, each of them attacking in a different direction. Chen Yuan shouted, "Elder Long, Junior Brother Su, block one path with me. These beads are vicious, everyone, get close quickly, and don't show off." Long Jingcheng and Su Gongming listened to his order, and went to block it, but when they came into contact with the yellow light formed by the crystal beads, there were 2 explosions, and the 2 of them could not withstand it. Blood spurted out from their mouths, and they were sent flying far away, even the profound swords in their hands wailed. The sword in Qin Yuan's hand was the sect master's imperial sword, and it was far more powerful than the other 5 profound swords. It was able to successfully block the star beads, but he had no time to help the others. In just a few breaths, 3 more people died, and their blood essence, bones, and flesh were all absorbed, and the color of the beads had already become bright red. Seeing that it was impossible to continue like this, he immediately let out a long roar, and took out the mysterious floating sword. Thousands of white rainbows gathered, and the surrounding turbulence was suppressed, but this could only subdue the surrounding turbulence within a mile, and he could not care about anything further. He transmitted his voice, "Everyone, go quickly, this is the sect master's order, don't disobey it." Fengxiang Sword School's rules were strict, and if there was even the slightest violation, there would be severe punishment. After Long Jingcheng and Su Gongming heard this, they did not hesitate to ride on their swords, and broke through the clouds, and went down to the sky. But the others were not so lucky, and they were all killed by the star beads, and their flesh and blood were devoured. In the end, only Qin Yuan was left in the field, and 4 yellow lights flew over, surrounding him from all directions. He only looked at them coldly, and did not help them. 1,000 feet away, the spiritual vigor changed, and Guiyuanjun walked out from his hiding place. There was a flag fluttering on top of his head, and he looked down, and said, "Qin Yuan, if you hand over the treasure bead quickly, I can let you live." Qin Yuan looked at the flag on top of his head, and the corner of his eyes twitched, and he was shocked. If he did not see wrongly, this item should belong to Elder Kim of Ku Xian clan, and he could use it to hide himself. Now that it appeared in the hands of this person, the ending was obvious, and from this, Yizhu and the others were likely to be killed. He said in a deep voice, "So this is a trap that you deliberately set." Guiyuanjun nodded and admitted, "That's right, Sect Master Chen, don't you think it's too late for you to know this now?" This time, he purposely spread the news that he wanted to fight with Zhang Yan, and attracted Ku Xian clan and Feng Xiang clan to come, and he ambushed and killed them. So far, he had obtained the blood of 18 Yuanying cultivators, and he had already made up for his previous losses. Chen Yuan stared at him, and said sternly, "You are not Brother Shang, who are you?" Guiyuanjun laughed, and said, "Speaking of which, I have to thank Sect Master Chen. If it wasn't for the help of Fengxiang Sword School, how could I escape so easily?" He had been trapped by the mighty people for 10,000 years, and his spirit was already at the point of dissipating. If no one opened the seal, it would disappear by itself, and because of Fengxiang Sword School, he could see the sky again. Chen Yuan was not stupid, and after thinking about the cause and effect, he had already guessed some of the truth. When he thought that this person was very likely to be the evil demon from 10,000 years ago, his heart gradually sank, and his original fighting spirit also faded. He took out his sword, and then used his finger to touch the sword, and streaks of crystal rainbow shot out, like electric arrows, and hit the 4 Yuanying so hard that they kept retreating. After doing this, his face was pale, and he almost could not stand still. He forced himself to jump up, and the sword light curled up, and a wisp of smoke flew up, and he flew towards the south. Guiyuanjun did not seem surprised, and looked at Qin Yuan's flying silhouette, and said from afar, "Sect Master Chen, keep the Yuanying beads, when I get out, I will come to your sect to get them." Chapter 737. A few days later, the news of the 2 sects being attacked reached the Hanyuan school. Inside the cave abode, Zhang Yan put down the talisman book and said to the Zhongtai disciple who came to deliver the letter, "Thank you, sect leader Qiao, for sending the messenger to tell me about this. When you return, please send my regards." The disciple said, "The letter has been delivered, I will take my leave now." He bowed and left the cave abode. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "Only sect leader Qin Yuan and 2 sword masters escaped from Fengxiang sword school, while Ku Xian school suffered even more losses. Sect leader He Yizhu only escaped with her life." After this incident, the strength of these 2 sects was greatly damaged. "I'm afraid they won't be able to defend the north for the next 100 years. Jingyu smiled and said, "Master, although this demon killed more than 10 people, he still couldn't find the star bead. It's been a waste of effort." Zhang Yan shook his head slightly and said, "I'm afraid not." He reached into his sleeve and took out a 9 yellow star bead. He placed it on the table and used his mana to suppress it, saying, "Jingyu, you also entered Dao with a demon body and once served by Jinren." He sighed, "Can you recognize what this is?" Jingyu stared at it for a few moments, and after a while, he patted his head, pointed and said, "Since Master mentioned it, I've vaguely thought of something. If I want to ascend and achieve the Dao, if there is no Xianmen Qi Dao method to pass down, the only way is to refine 9 natal pearls, only then can I avoid the calamity that descends from the heavens. Looking at the appearance of this object, it is very similar to the 9 yellow star pearl, but the demon cultivators that can cultivate to this level are all ancient sky demon lineages." At the end of his words, his voice unconsciously revealed a sense of reverence. Ancient sky beasts were demon cultivators who could fight against Jinren He Dongtian. It was not something a little demon like him could compare with. Zhang Yan's eyes lit up. He said, "After that day, there were Zhongtai disciples who went to check. However, the cultivators of the 2 sects didn't even manage to find a single corpse. They only found some damaged Dharma robes and magic treasures. They were suspected to have had their blood essence, bones, and flesh sucked away just like Elder Lin. I had my suspicions earlier, but from what you've said, this item is most likely the natal pearl." Jingyu was startled. Could it be that this demon is absorbing blood essence to free its corporeal body? Not only could the natal pearl avoid calamities, but it could also help the natal pearl. It was also where essence blood was stored, and it could devour other people's essence blood for its own use. The more essence pearls there were, the faster it would be refined. What was even more worrisome was that as long as a drop of the heavenly phase blood essence remained, as long as the soul was not lost, the heavenly phase blood essence would be destroyed. Even if the body was completely destroyed, it could be reforged again. Not to mention the body of a sky demon, it might not rot like a normal demon. Zhang Yan looked out of the abode. His gaze was deep and unfathomable, as if he was looking into the distance. He said, "The day before yesterday, Zhang wrote a letter saying that the seal is about to be broken. Whether it is true or not, we will know when the time comes." Jingyu knew the origin of this demon and couldn't help swallowing his saliva. He said, "Master, this is an ancient evil sealed by the founding master. I'm afraid it will be hard to deal with. Why don't we go to the sect and ask the Zenrens to come and subdue it?" Zhang Yan smiled. "If we alarm the sect for this matter, we will lose the big picture because of a small matter. Wait for my order." The disciples will be at their posts for the next few days and are not allowed to enter or leave without permission. If there are any changes in the outside world, there is no need to panic, I have my own plans. Dongxing South Continent, Quantum. After Guiyuan Jun successfully killed the cultivators of the 2 sects, he didn't look for Zhang Yan to fight. Instead, he rode the wind and clouds, using more than 20 days to return to this place. At this moment, Qin Yuan had already withdrawn the disciples. Before he left, he not only slaughtered all the disciples in Quantum Inn, he also destroyed all the spiritual force in the surroundings. As a result, the vegetation within 100 miles withered and the rivers and springs dried up. At this moment, it was a lifeless scene, like a ghost town. Guiyuan Jun didn't care. He looked up at the sky and thought, "In 7 days, I will be free. As long as I find the origin bead and find a place to cultivate for 1,000 years, I will be able to recover my vitality." It seems that Daoren once passed down his teachings. At that time, I will definitely kill my way to their door to vent the hatred of being sealed for 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, there was a powerful cultivator who sealed several evil beings in the world. After he heard about it, he knew that he was one of them. Thus, he started to prepare a way out. First, he stored his soul in a treasure and sent out his origin bead to wait for the future. After it was sealed, the spirit-returning sect accidentally obtained it and used it as their sect's treasure. As for the origin bead, it needed to be nourished by the cultivator's blood. That was just a restriction that Guiyuan had set up beforehand. He wanted to borrow the sect's power to nourish his body, so that the origin bead would always be filled with blood so that it wouldn't leak out at any time. However, even a person like Tai Hung Grand Ancestor would have his blood dried up and his soul gradually dissipated if he didn't get out of the seal for a long time. Even though it had a treasure to protect its soul, it was sealed for 10,000 years. In the end, only a remnant of its soul was left. If it wasn't for the Fengxiang Sword School discovering the seal and thinking that there was an ancient treasure buried in it, it wouldn't have been able to escape death. He walked around Quantum Inn and finally found a hall. He landed on the roof and sat cross-legged, patiently waiting for the seal to be broken. Soon, 7 days had passed. On the 8th day, he sensed something and quickly released his spiritual opportunity to investigate. Initially, it was like drilling a narrow well. It was cramped and difficult for him to go in and out of the place. However, this time, there was no hindrance. It was obvious that the spirit of the seal had dissipated. He couldn't help but laugh wildly. A white smoke flew out from the top of the door and tossed Shang Qingjuan's body into the ground. In the depths of Quantum Inn, a demon that was 10,000 feet long suddenly opened its ferocious eyes. 2 faint rays of light pierced through the surface and shone through the mountains. Its abdomen was densely packed with long legs that crawled up slowly. As it moved the earth and rocks, the mountains within 100 miles of it collapsed and the ground cracked. After a short while, an earth-shattering sound was heard. Gravel and sand flew everywhere. On the surface, the entire Quantum Inn had disappeared. In the black mist, a ferocious centipede drilled out from the ground. Its head was like a hill, its tail was like a scissors, and its body was segmented like an armor. There were 3,650 of them. Each segment had a pair of hooked feet that were dark green in color like hard jade. Under its jaw was a pair of pincers that cracked and intersected. As soon as it appeared, the demonic aura soared into the sky. The mountains and rivers were horrified. The sky was filled with black clouds and the sun and moon were gloomy. The centipede shook its body, and its limbs crackled explosively, causing the surrounding mountains and rivers to tremble. With a strange hiss, a mass of black baleful chi that covered the sky surged out from its abdomen, and it flew up into the air, carrying a boundless momentum as it flew towards the east. At this moment, thousands of miles away, in the mountain gate of Fengxiang Sword School, a Taoist with a square face and big ears was suddenly startled. He looked towards the west with a solemn expression. After pondering for a moment, he ordered the child beside him, "The enemy is approaching. Quickly pass down my order. Order Chen Yuan to bring his disciples to Tsangfeng Celestial City to temporarily hide. No matter what, without my order, they are not to come out." The child beside him saw that he was serious and did not dare to ask more. After a bow, he quickly left. The Taoist pondered for a moment and used mana to make 2 distress talismans. He sent them into the sky and they flew towards Qing Xian clan and Ku Xian clan respectively. Donghua Continent, Qinsang School. Shen Baishuang rode the wind and arrived outside a side hall of the floating heavenly palace. He landed and a child came out of the hall. He bowed respectfully and said, "Jinren Shen, Sect Master, please enter the hall." Shen Baishuang waved his sleeves and walked into the hall. 3 months ago, he broke through the hidden gate and finally stepped into the elephant phase realm. This time, after achieving the position of Grotto Heaven, Sect Master Qin Mabai summoned him for the first time. During the time of the 3 great calamities, there was another Grotto Heaven Jinren in Qinsang School. All the sects were shocked. After the sword battle, the 6 demon sects had been making a lot of movements in the past few decades. However, after knowing about this, they restrained themselves a little. When he entered the room, he saw Qin Mabai sitting on a jade platform. The waves on top of his head were rolling with endless momentum. With just a glance, he felt his body was heavy. He quickly lowered his head and went up to greet him, saying, "Greetings, Sect Master Shixiang." Qin Mabai smiled and said, "Junior Shixiang, you may dispense with the formalities. Sit down and talk." Shen Baishuang bowed again and sat down at the side. Qin Mabai chatted with him for a while and talked about his understanding of cultivation. Only then did he get to the point. He said, "A few days ago, in the ancestral hall, the forbidden tablet rang on its own. It seems that another seal has been broken." Shen Baishuang's expression was calm. Today, he asked him to come because he knew that he had something to ask of him. He said, "Sect Master Shixiang, do you know where the seal is?" Qin Mabai said, "Dongshin continent." Shen Baishuang thought for a while and said, "Is it where martial nephew Zhang went?" Qin Mabai nodded and smiled. "Yes, I sent him there to find a way to get rid of this hidden danger." However, after the seal was broken, there was a change in the fate of heaven. The demon below seemed to be breaking free. Shen Baishuang's expression was solemn. He said, "I heard that the ancestral master sealed the demons. They are all ancient and fierce creatures. Although martial nephew Zhang's cultivation is outstanding among his peers, I'm afraid he is not a match for such a great demon." Qin Mabai said slowly, "It is because of this that I called junior brother here." Shen Baishuang said, "Senior brother, do you want me to go to Donghua to help?" Qin Mabai smiled faintly and said, "I gave him this task because I wanted to test him. After you go, if he is not in danger, there is no need for you to show yourself. Let's see how he resolves it. If he can't handle it, then you can save him." Shen Baishuang's expression changed slightly, then he nodded slowly. Currently, among the top 10 disciples in the sect, those who had cultivated to the Yuanying realm were all outside training. But looking around, only Zhang Yan was in the most difficult situation. But not only did he not feel that he was being treated harshly, he could see that the sect master valued him very much. Those who could become Grotto Heaven in the sect were all chosen from the top 10 disciples, but there were only a few who could truly receive the full support of the sect. For example, even though he was the eldest disciple of Zhui Yuming, his path was still bumpy. This generation of disciples was facing the 3 great tribulations. This was not only a predestined fate, but also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Therefore, the clan masters behind them were all exerting their strength, and the competition could be said to be fierce. At this moment, whoever could make a great contribution to the sect would have the opportunity to step into the divine gate first. An hour later, Shen Baishuang left the floating heavenly palace. He glanced at the sky, then his body swayed. With a rumble, a towering dharma that was like a mountain rose into the sky. It stood tall in the sky, and below it were mountain ranges. Water swirled around the clouds, and the air was clear and majestic. White rainbows floated in all directions, making a noise in the sky. When he achieved the Dharma, Qin Yu once praised him, "Clear water sprinkles the jade earth, the clouds evaporate the mountain, and the frost reflects the whiteness of the water." Thus, his Dharma was called Frost Sky Cloud Mountain. At this moment, this Dharma surged up, and with a loud bang, its momentum had already surpassed the surface of the clouds, and it flew into the sky. Chapter 738. P.S. It's a little late, but there will definitely be. You can see tomorrow. Just as Guiyuan Jun was about to attack Fengxiang Sword School, a grand spiritual vigor shrouded the mountain. All the cultivators on the mountain sensed it at the same time. Because those who did not come did not know whether they were friend or foe, and what their purpose was. Facing this almost unstoppable momentum, almost everyone was frightened and uneasy. Chu Mu ran and the other 2 elders sensed that something was wrong. Without caring about anything else, they hurriedly went up the mountain to look for Zhang Yan. When they reached the top of the mountain, they saw that the two spiritual masters, Song Chuyuan and Tang Jin, had already arrived. However, the two of them didn't look good either. They quickly went up to greet. Chu Mu was sweating profusely and asked in a low voice, "Jinren, do you know who is coming?" Song and Tang shook their heads. At this moment, a rumbling sound could be heard as the stone door of the abode slowly opened, and Zhang Yan walked out slowly from within. His expression was calm and composed as he swept his gaze over and took in everyone's expressions. He couldn't help but smile as he said, "There's no need to panic. The person who came from outside the mountain is an esteemed guest that I invited." Chu Mu and the others looked at each other in surprise. If they were not mistaken, the person from outside the mountain was a Jinren of Dongtian. They did not expect the headmaster to be able to invite such a person. However, when they thought about Zhang Yan's background, they suddenly felt relieved. They bowed and left. Zhang Yan waited for them to leave, then he shook his sleeves and rode the strong wind to the sky. When he was in the sky, he stopped and bowed, "Greetings, Headmaster Tao." The clouds in front of him slowly dispersed, and a young Taoist with eyes like stars appeared, riding a green phoenix in the sky. The corners of his sleeves fluttered, and the image behind him was faintly discernible, as if there were dragons and cranes flying in the sky. Spiritual chi converged into streams of silver jade rivers, and it sounded like a clear spring in an empty valley. It flowed gently. He returned the greeting and said with a smile, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Zhang. After receiving your letter, I immediately rushed over. Is it too late?" Zhang Yan let out a long laugh and said, "Not late, you came just in time. I have already prepared wine in the pavilion, please come, Jinren." Spiritual Master Tao waved the rui in his hand, and the green wand flapped its wings and followed Zhang Yan down to Zhangzhou Peak. They arrived at a pavilion and sat down according to the host and guest. After sitting down, the two first talked about what they saw. Then, Zhang Yan briefly described the current situation in Dongxing State. Jinren Tao nodded and said, "When I came here a few days ago, I saw that the south of the continent was filled with evil spirits. What you said should be true, there is a big demon born here. However, when I looked again yesterday, I saw that the demon did not come towards you, but headed east. Just now, I saw a clear chi that was not much weaker than it was fighting with it. It was obvious that it was fighting fiercely." Zhang Yan was slightly shocked. He had 4 life essence pearls in his hands and knew that after he broke free, he would definitely come looking for him. Which was why on the day he left, he sent a letter to Clear Feather's sect to invite Tao Jinren over to be prepared. However, looking at the current situation, it was a little unexpected. It was obvious that the other party had gone to find trouble with the Fengxiang sword sect instead of him. Tao Jinren smiled, "Taoist, don't be suspicious. This might be because of me." He looked at Zhang Yan's questioning gaze. He explained, "We have chi techniques, and when we head out, it is hard for us to hide our tracks. It's very difficult for us to hide our whereabouts. Although I've used a technique to conceal myself, from what fellow Taoist said, that demon's origin is not ordinary. Perhaps it has other methods to detect my presence." Zhang Yan thought about it and felt that it was possible. If Guiyuan Jun found out that Tao Jinren was here, then no matter where he went, he would have to face a grotto heaven person. Why not snatch the pearl from nearby? Tao Jinren suddenly turned his head and looked towards the south. Just now, there are 2 auras that are not weaker than this person heading over there. Zhang Yan thought about it and understood, the 3 sects in the south are of the same breath and branch. If the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. Fengxiang Sword School is being attacked, so the other 2 sects are heading over to help. Tao Jinren didn't think much of it and shook his head. If that Guiyuan Jun is really a sky demon, 1 more or 1 less doesn't make a difference. Zhang Yan was shocked. "Why is that?" Tao Jinren said, "You also know that I used to be a disciple of the South Flower sect. This sect is good at subduing demons. However, there are many records that say that the sky demon's body is hard to break, and it has the origin pearl to avoid tribulations. Without a treasure, it is really difficult to subdue it." Zhang Yan didn't know much about the sky demon. After hearing this, he asked a few more questions. Tao Xinren also told him everything he knew. After listening, he seemed to be deep in thought. He stood up and looked at the endless mountains in a daze. Tao Xinren thought that he was worried that it would be difficult to subdue the demon, so he said, "Don't worry, fellow Zhang. I have brought the fine prisoner pot with me. With your mountain gate formation as support, even though I can't eliminate this demon, it is not difficult to defeat it." Zhang Yan's goal was to eliminate the sky demon, but defeating it was far from enough. He smiled and shook his head. "I am not worried about this, but I suddenly thought of something that might be able to eliminate this demon completely." Tao Xinren couldn't help but be surprised and said, "Could it be that fellow Zhang has a treasure in hand?" Zhang Yan smiled and didn't answer. Instead, he stretched out his hand and pointed to the sky, saying, "In your opinion, who can win this battle?" Tao Xinren observed for a while and said, "Even though the three clear qis are strong, they do not have the appearance of being strong. Instead, they have the appearance of hiding. That demon, on the other hand, is strong and powerful. If there are no accidents, the three will retreat." Zhang Yan nodded his head and was about to speak when suddenly a glittering golden communication talisman floated up the mountain. He took it and saw that it was Zhong Tai who had sent a letter to him. Even though the words and sentences in the letter were polite, they were beating around the bush, trying to find out about Tao Xinren's background. Zhang Yan smiled slightly. This was also within his expectations. A Taoist abode master suddenly came to Dongxing continent and stopped at the Shenwu mountain. Of course, the Zhongtai sect, which was close at hand, would not be unresponsive. It was also normal for them to send a letter to probe. However, he thought for a while and his eyes flickered, but he didn't rush to reply. Instead, he threw the letter on the table and sat down to drink. The two of them talked about Dao on the mountain peak, waiting for the winner to be decided. In a flash, 3 days had passed. Tao Xinren tapped the rui in his hand on the stone table and sighed, "The three clear qis have gone in different directions. This battle should be Guiyuanjun's victory." However, just as he finished speaking, he made a sound of surprise and revealed a look of surprise. Zhang Yan asked, "Is there something wrong?" Tao Xinren said in a low voice, "Just now, the evil qi on the demon's body is retreating rapidly, and it seems to be weakening. At first, I thought that it was because his qi of vitality was greatly damaged. However, after a while, I realized that it was the demon's transformation." Zhang Yan thought for a while, and after a long time, he laughed and said, "If I am not wrong, the demon is doing this to deal with me." Tao Xinren said, "Why do you think so?" Zhang Yan smiled, "It is true that the heavenly demon's body is strong, but if it is not a person with wings, the art of flying is not his forte. However, once he transforms into a human body, it will be different. In this case, he can use the magical weapon of flying and will not be trapped here. He is afraid that I will take the primordial bead and escape to another state." His guess was not far from the truth. Guiyuanjun heard from Shang Qingjun that Zhang Yan was not a cultivator from Dongxing State, and his base was not here. The most troublesome thing was that he was good at flying. If he abandoned the mountain and ran away, where could he find him? Previously, he borrowed Shang Qingjun's body, and he was able to fly. However, now that he could not do it, he decided to return to his human body, and then refine a magical weapon of flying and kill his way here. Tao Xinren thought for a while and agreed, "What you said is reasonable. Then, what do you plan to do?" Zhang Yan did not answer but asked, "I heard from Xinren that the transformation of the heavenly demon is not something that can be done in a few days. It will take a few years, or a month." Tao Xinren thought for a while and said, "I have cultivated for thousands of years, but I have never seen a heavenly demon. I only read a few words from the Nanhua ancient books. However, judging from the qi dynamic just now, it will take at least half a month." Zhang Yan laughed and said, "That is enough." He immediately sent a message. Tao Xinren was stunned when he heard it. Then, his eyes lit up and he kept nodding his head. In the end, he thought carefully and said, this plan is feasible, but the key is how to persuade those few fellow Taoists. Zhang Yan said, it is inappropriate to invite them in the name of Shenwu Mountain, but if we invite them in the name of Zhongtai, I believe they will not reject us. Tao Zhenren looked at the letter on the table just now and said with a smile, so fellow Taoist already has a plan. Zhang Yan also smiled. He used his mana and wrote on the letter in the air. After a while, he waved his sleeve and the letter flew up, turning into a golden light and leaving the mountain gate. In less than an hour, the letter arrived in front of Zhongtai Mountain Gate. It made a turn and landed at the back of Hope Sound Mountain. After Sect Master Qiao Huanzhuan sent the letter, he had been waiting there anxiously. Now that the reply had arrived, he quickly took it into his hands and opened it. He felt slightly relieved. He raised his head and said to the jade statue in the distance, Zhenren, so this person is the helper that fellow Taoist Zhang invited to deal with the demon. But when he read the letter again, his face changed slightly. The letter mentioned inviting Zhenren Zheng. But this uncle master relied on the white elephant cauldron to prolong his life. Would he expose himself if he went? Thinking of this, he could not help but show hesitation. The jade statue noticed and asked in a deep voice, what does the letter say? Let me see. Qiao Huanzhuan sighed but did not dare to disobey. He gently handed the letter to the front of the jade statue. A golden light shone on the letter and it floated in front of the jade statue. After an unknown amount of time, there seemed to be string music coming from the jade statue. Then there was a tinkling sound, like pearls falling on a jade plate. It was extremely pleasing to the ears. A wisp of smoke floated out from the statue's mouth and nose. In an instant, it condensed and a Daoran with white temples appeared. He was wearing a big cloak and held a thin and long golden mallet in his hand. He looked hale and hearty. Qiao Huanzhuan was shocked, Uncle Master, are you really going? That Daoran said, since there is an important guest outside the mountain, as the host, how can I not go for a while? He waved his hand and the white rhinoceros in front of the mountain gate came over unwillingly and lay on the ground. Qiao Huanzhuan saw that she could not stop him and was helpless. She could only say, can Marshal Nephew accompany me? Zhenren Zheng sat on the white rhinoceros and said, no need. Just tell the disciples to guard the mountain gate. He picked up the golden mallet and lightly knocked on the white rhinoceros' head. The beast's forehooves stomped and a cloud of smoke appeared under it. It lifted its body and rose up into the clouds. Chapter 739. Zheng Weixing left the mountain gate and rode the white rhinoceros up to the sky. Using the strong wind to travel, he arrived at Sangzhu Peak 3 days later. He looked down and saw that the restriction had been opened, but no one came out to welcome him. He was a little dissatisfied, so he released a stream of qi. But just as he was about to use it, he felt a surge of spiritual vigor from below. Inside it, there were countless fish dragons and strange dragons flying around as if they were going to jump up. His heart skipped a beat and he didn't test it anymore. He knocked the white rhinoceros's head with his mallet and dropped it. Zhang Yan had been waiting for a long time. When he saw him, he bowed and said, are you Zhongtai Zhenren Zheng? Zheng Weixing nodded and returned the greeting. He then looked at Tao Zhenhong and said, fellow Taoist, you don't look familiar. May I know which continent and which sect are you from? Tao Zhenren returned the greeting and said, I am Tao Zhenhong, in charge of the overseas Clear Feather sect. When Zheng Weixing heard that he was the sect master, he couldn't help but look solemn. He cupped his hands and said, so it's sect master Tao, please forgive me. As long as a Taoist Dongtian was in charge of a sect, he was either the founder or the sect's elders had such cultivation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to do this. But no matter which one it was, he couldn't underestimate them. Hence, his attitude was much more solemn. Tao Zhenren smiled and said, I don't deserve it. He paused and said, today, fellow Taoist Zheng and I are guests. If we continue talking, I'm afraid we'll overpower the host. Zheng Weixing was a little surprised. When he came, he thought that the person who invited him was Tao Zhenhong and that he was merely borrowing the name of Han Yuan. He didn't think that the person who invited him was really Zhang Yan. He glanced sideways at him and said coldly, "I wonder why Sect Master Zhang has invited me here." Zhang Yan didn't say anything else. Instead, he took out an item and placed it on the table. He then took 2 steps back and said, "I accidentally obtained this item. Please take a look, Jinren." Zheng Weisheng didn't care at first, but when he looked at it, his expression changed and he couldn't help but take a few steps forward. He stared and said, "Jade turtle shell." Previously, because his lifespan was nearing its end, he had always been looking for a method to prolong his life. He also had the idea of using the jade turtle shell, but every time he came to the 5 Dragons River, he could sense a dangerous qi sleeping deep at the bottom of the river. He didn't want to take the risk, so in the end he could only give up. This jade turtle shell couldn't increase his lifespan by 100 years like the rumors said. However, he did have 50 to 60 years. It was just that he knew that this item was not easy to obtain. The other party would most likely make things difficult for him. While he was pondering, Zhang Yan added, "This jade turtle shell is useless to me. I'm willing to give it to you, perfected one." Zheng Weisheng thought for a moment and put it into his sleeve. He looked at the two and said bluntly, "Tell me, what do you need me to do?" Zhang Yan clasped his hands together and said, "I'd like to request Jinren to send a letter to the 3 sects of southern continent in Zhongtai's name and invite them to come over for a meeting, so that we can discuss the great plan of eliminating the demon together." Zheng Weisheng frowned and said, "It's not difficult for me to send a letter, and I'm confident that I can invite them. However, it's impossible for you to borrow the hands of the 3 sects to block the disaster for you. I advise you to dispel this idea as soon as possible." He believed that he could tell that Guiyuan Jun's target was the star bead. He had already been there once, and after defeating the 3 southern sects, he would definitely come to the Xinwu mountain again. Zhang Yan wanted to ask the 3 southern sects to help him, but how could he succeed? Zhang Yan looked over and said, "As long as Jinren Zheng is willing to send a letter, I have my ways to convince the 3 enlightened masters." Zheng Weisheng said coldly, "I'm just reminding you out of goodwill. Whether it succeeds or not has nothing to do with me." He casually pinched out 3 talisman inscriptions. After a while, lines of words appeared on it. With a flick of his finger, the 3 talisman books whizzed and flew away. Zhang Yan saw him send the letter and left. He thought his plan was half done, so he went back to the pavilion and waited patiently. About 6 or 7 days later, there was a sudden surge of wind and clouds in the sky. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder roared, and it rained heavily. Tao Jinren and Zheng Weisheng both understood that there were several grotto heavens traveling together, which caused the changes in the weather. In the past moment, there were 3 majestic auras arriving at the peak of the mountain. All of a sudden, the mountains shook, and the rivers surged. It was as if heaven and earth were trembling. Due to Zhang Yan's instructions, the disciples in the mountain remained in their positions despite being terrified. No one came to the peak again. The clouds in the sky stirred and then slowly dispersed, revealing 3 figures. The one on the left was a young man with rosy cheeks, but his eyebrows and hair were all white. He looked old and experienced. The one in the middle was a young lady with a cold gaze. She wore plain white sleeves and a long belt around her waist. The one on the far right was about 40 years old. He was a middle-aged Taoist with a square face and big ears. He had a short beard and a calm expression on his face. The 3 of them retracted their surging spiritual vigor and slowly descended. After they landed, Zheng Weisheng took the initiative to greet them, "Greetings to the 3 of you." The woman in white and the middle-aged Taoist returned the greeting. Only the young man took a closer look at Zheng Weisheng and laughed, "I thought you wouldn't make it, old Zheng. But looking at you, I think you can still struggle for hundreds of years." Zheng Weisheng did not care about what he said. He turned his body and gestured, "Let me introduce you to these 2 Taoist friends." The 3 of them looked over. Just now, they also noticed Tao Jinren. There was a grotto heaven Jinren here. It was obvious that he came from another continent. As they did not know his purpose, they were cautious and did not take the initiative to talk to him. As for Zhang Yan, although he only had Yuanying cultivation, he stood in front of Tao Jinren. They suspected that he was the person in charge. Not only did they not look down on him, but they also paid more attention to him. They were secretly guessing his identity. Zheng Weisheng first pointed at Zhang Yan and said, "This is the Shenwu Mountains sect leader Zhang. I followed his request and sent the letter to invite you here." He then pointed at Tao Jinren and said, "This is the distinguished guest that sect leader Zhang invited from the sea. He is the Clear Feather sect's sect leader Tao Jinren." Zhang Yan took a step forward. He faced the three grotto heaven Jinren, but his expression was calm. He cupped his hands and said, "I invited you here today because of that demon." After the three of them fought with Guiyuan Jun, they knew that if they let such a fierce demon live, there would be no peace in Dongxing continent in the future. Especially since this demon liked to devour cultivators' essence and blood, the foundation of the three sects might be shaken in the long run. They had to find a way to get rid of it. Hearing Zhang Yan's words, the middle-aged Taoist was the first to speak. "Do you know the origin of that fierce demon?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "That Guiyuan Jun is not an ordinary demon. He is a heavenly demon that has lived for 10,000 years. If you don't have a treasure, it is extremely difficult to kill him." The young man let out a strange cry and glared at the middle-aged Taoist. He scolded, "No wonder his skin is so thick. So he is a heavenly demon." Gone shouting, "It is all the fault of Fengxiang Sword School. A few days ago, the three of them fought with Guiyuan Jun together. However, they used everything they had, but they could not break through his strong armor. In the end, they had no choice but to retreat. Fortunately, his flying speed was slow. After being delayed for a while, more than half of the cultivators from Fengxiang Sword School managed to escape." The middle-aged Taoist said helplessly, "Martial nephew Chen thought that there were ancient treasures buried under the seal, so he was tempted. Who would have thought?" Sigh. The lady in white said faintly, "Since it is a heavenly demon, could it be that the star bead is his natal origin bead?" Zhang Yan said, "That is correct. Buried under the dragon pillar are actually his 9 origin beads. It is because those beads obtained the cultivator's essence and blood that the fierce demon was revived." Everyone at the scene was speechless. Speaking of this matter, the 4 sects could not get away from it. At this moment, Zhang Yan laughed and said, "Now, I have a way to kill this demon." The middle-aged Taoist became spirited and said, "I would like to hear the details." Zhang Yan looked at the 3 grotto heavens and said, "Before Master Damu ascended, he left behind a killing treasure. Master Damu used it to restrain the demon's 9 natal origin beads. If we can take them out, we will definitely be able to subdue the demon." The 3 of them looked at Zheng Weisheng. He snorted but did not hide it. He admitted, "That's right, there is such a treasure." The young man's eyes lit up and said, "Since there is such a treasure, Zheng Daoren, why don't you take it out quickly? Do you have any conditions? Let me tell you, don't be reluctant. That demon eats people without spitting out their bones. Our 3 sects are in trouble, are you going to hide from it, Zhongtai?" Zheng Weisheng frowned and said, "Why would I be reluctant? This treasure was borrowed from someone else by the patriarch. He once said that the younger generation disciples are not allowed to take it. However, if disciples from other continents come, they can try it. If they are fated with the treasure, they can take it." When the 3 of them heard this, they couldn't help but be tempted. Although the 3 sects had been established in Dongsheng for a long time, they were still from other continents. Who knows, they might be fated with the treasure. The young man couldn't help but ask, "Where is the treasure now?" Zheng Weisheng sneered and said, "Beima Ocean World, under the old celestial gathering city." The 3 of them were stunned. The woman frowned and said, "No wonder you called us here. Are we going to provoke the Python tribe now?" Tao Jinren walked up and interrupted, "I am an outsider, but I have dealt with Luo Mengzi of the Python tribe a few times. He knows when to advance and when to retreat. If the 5 of us go together, it won't be difficult to get the treasure." Zhang Yan smiled and continued, "Masters, we are not going to attack the Python tribe. We are just going to get the treasure and try our luck. As long as Luo Mengzi is not in cahoots with the demon python, he won't stop us. Zheng Weixing was shocked. Whether it was Guiyuan Jun or Luo Mengzi, they were both demon cultivators. If they were in cahoots with each other, it would be even more difficult to deal with them. The first to bear the brunt would probably be the Zhongtai sect. This was not impossible. The Python tribe had long wanted to enter Dongsheng, but they were blocked by the alliance of the 5 sections. Now that they had the chance, they might come and take a bite out of Dongsheng. If they could use this opportunity to get the treasure to show their might, it would not be a bad idea. Thinking of this, he said, I think this is feasible. The middle-aged cultivator said, it will only take 1 or 2 days to go to the Python tribe. Fellow Ji, fellow Heng, what do you two think? The woman in white said lightly, we can give it a try. None of you have a better idea. If we are lucky and succeed, we might be able to get rid of this demon. Even if the treasure is not fated with us, we can still intimidate the Python tribe and stop them from acting recklessly.